People always underestimate how powerful Amanda Waller is. And in Absolute Power, this comic, she takes out the entirety of the Justice League, and it's all Batman's fault. So what this does is this initially opens up with like some guys in Metropolis executing a robbery, and Superman just like freezes their helicopter and uses his heat vision to take the guns out of their hands and so on and so forth. It's business as usual, right? Then like one of these guys panics, fires off a shot, and instead of it like ricocheting off of Superman, it hits him. Like it literally penetrates him, right? And so Superman, who just never really gets injured, just starts falling from the building. And then after that, it's just this kind of open war on all the superheroes who were out there, because you switch over to Keystone City with Animal Man. He's not overly important, although his new 52 run was really amazing. But basically he can like talk and control animals. Think of him as like the animal version of Swamp Thing, basically. The problem is like once he steps down on the ground, people immediately start attacking him, right? Like without a moment's hesitation, they just start like pummeling this guy. And so Batman and Robin are just kind of watching all this unfold, and it comes off so strange because there's no real conceivable reason for why the general public would just suddenly turn on superheroes and attack them everywhere they can. But then what you start realizing is that what's going on here is an entire kind of campaign of putting out like false information, so much so that nothing the general public is seeing is real. A good example of this is that with Batman and Superman watching everything, there's this footage that comes out of Philadelphia police, right? It says they have no explanation as to why the captain began attacking innocent civilians, of course referring to like Captain Marvel, Shazam, whatever you want to call him. And then you have Mr. Terrific, right, who chimes in and he's just like, that is not true. Like I was literally hanging out with a captain not too long ago, we were fighting Giganta, right? Nightwing says the same thing. He's like, there's this footage of the Titans like running around launching these attacks, but like we weren't there at that point. It's all fake. Nothing that anybody is seeing is real. And so one of the things that happens is there's this footage of like Hal Jordan, right, who just like goes on this rampage, and Wonder Woman's just like, no, like Hal doesn't even have his ring anymore. Like what in the world is going on here? Firestorm launches an attack, Blue Beetle launches an attack, and so everything that everybody's seeing is all just false. People don't know how to make any of this stuff make sense. So here's the question, right? Like, how do you get from point A to point B? How do you get from this place where society loved superheroes to superheroes seemingly going on a rampage and like attacking everybody? Okay, so wind the clock back here. Let's talk about a story called Absolute Power Ground Zero. So this was kind of like a prelude to the main Absolute Power event. Again, you know, that's what we're talking about here. But what it did is it had a series of mini stories, and only one of them is really relevant to what it is that we're talking about here. And this is basically the discovery of the wife or the bride of Brainiac, right? So all the stuff that we're talking about comes out of the Batman and Superman comics. And the long and short of it is that Batman had basically created a kind of failsafe device called Failsafe, that if Batman ever went off the rails and killed somebody, Failsafe would activate, and then of course it would basically take Batman out because he was a credible danger at that point in time. Failsafe basically became self-aware. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into it that we don't need to go into here, but it effectively became autonomous, and now it sees all superheroes as something that needs to be destroyed. But the wife of Brainiac comes out of the Superman comics, in the sense that what ended up happening is Brainiac showed up on Earth, started capturing all the superheroes, siphoning off their powers, so on and so forth, and using those powers to basically charge and bring life to a female version of himself, so he could have some kind of companionship. The lengths that people will go to find love in the 21st century. And so what ends up happening is ultimately Brainiac was defeated, and his wife was just kind of shut down before she could actually activate, came crashing down into Earth, and that's where Amanda Waller picks up. Because what happens is Amanda Waller and Failsafe both find the bride of Brainiac, but she's kind of a clean slate, right? There's no real knowledge in her memory banks at all. And so it makes her incredibly easy to manipulate, because while she's crash landed there and with Waller and Failsafe responding, that Peacemaker just sort of keeps an eye on everything going on in Metropolis. And he basically tells them, like, you know, Superman's come back and all those people whose powers were taken by Brainiac, those powers are being restored. So basically the coast is clear, do what you need to do, and and head back to the base of operations. And that's exactly what they do. And so what ends up happening is, because of the technological abilities of Failsafe, a living computer, essentially, it allows Amanda Waller to basically hijack the Brainiac Queen and then in turn inject herself into this woman's mind, or this machine's mind, and then appear as a kind of assistant or aid of sorts. And that's why you get this moment where basically Amanda Waller is in a house out in the middle of nowhere that looks like Kent Farm, to be honest, and then in turn this little girl shows up there, right? That little girl is the in-brain personification of the Brainiac Queen, essentially. And what Amanda Waller does is, the first thing that happens is when she approaches as somebody there that's to help her, right, a kind of mentor, Superman shows up to attack. Because much like what you would expect from a child, things are perceived in very simple terms, right? Absolute good, absolute bad, no real moral ambiguity or complexity to life. And so because of that, of course, Amanda Waller ends up taking out Superman and then tells this little girl, superheroes are dangerous, right? Superheroes are really, really bad guys. And it's our job to make sure that the world is safe from superheroes. We can't let them win. And so because it's a simulation, time passes at whatever speed you want it to, right? You could live 1 year in this simulation for every 1 second that passes in the real world. And that's kind of what happens, that over the course of like 20 years, Amanda Waller basically brainwashes this chick, right? Teaches her that superheroes are bad, that superheroes are dangerous, that they're really a massive catastrophe for the world overall. And here's what's so interesting about that. You could make a credible argument, and maybe we'll make a video about this, but you could make a credible argument that Amanda Waller's not wrong, right? I mean, when you look at superheroes as a whole, and you look at how crazy the world is, Gotham did not become as crazy as it was until Batman showed up. It wasn't until Bruce Wayne became Batman that you had the Joker, and you had Scarecrow, and you had the Penguin, and you had Two-Face, and all these different guys. So you can make an argument there, right? That like the arrival of superheroes basically necessitated the emergence of equally dangerous or more dangerous villains. So superheroes make the world worse. And that's even leaving out things like the emergence of guys like Darkseid, right? This multiversal force of evil and different things along those lines. Now, of course, it also begs the question, would guys like Darkseid have invaded Earth anyway, right? And if the superheroes weren't there, who would protect it, right? So there's, of course, that kind of savior aspect that comes into it. But I say all that to say, when it comes to someone like Amanda Waller, and when it comes to the world's perception of superheroes, there is no simple moral clause here. There is no superheroes good, villains bad, done and done, right? There is a lot of moral ambiguity and complexity in all of it. And so ultimately, like after this 20 years have passed, Amanda Waller basically ends the simulation, and she just kind of tells the Queen, who for the most part, she seems to have revealed over the course of these 20 years, like, this is all a simulation, nothing you're seeing here is real. And she tells her, like, just follow my voice. And so once Amanda Waller emerges and the Queen is basically turned on, right, like allowed to come online, she emerges viewing Amanda Waller as a kind of mother of sorts, and things go forward from there. And so jumping back to where we are right now, that's the assault, that's the campaign that's going on. It's a multifaceted effort between Amanda Waller, the Brainiac Queen, and Failsafe to take out all the superheroes. And they do. They succeed in this story, right? In this first part that we're covering here. It's amazing because you do get a couple small little things in between. For example, you switch over to the Daily Planet, and one of the things you learn is kind of a reminder for the person who's getting into DC Comics for the first time of the nature of the Daily Planet, why it's different from other news organizations. In this instance, basically Lois Lane is yelled at because all the other news organizations are just kind of running with all the information they have and then verifying it after. But the response of Lois is like, that's not what the Daily Planet does, right? We're not lazy, that we verify our information and then we report the facts, which ultimately means that more often than not, you're going to end up behind the scenes. But the bigger thing here is that there's this kind of question that everybody has, which is, who is behind all of this? What's the reason for this? Because the superheroes don't know that Amanda Waller, Failsafe, and the Brainiac Queen are doing all of this, that Amanda Waller is really the one spearheading it. And so what you end up doing is you switch over to a kind of meeting and a conversation between Sarge Steele and Amanda Waller in the Hall of Order. Now, for those of you guys who don't know who Sarge Steele is, technically he's been around since like 1964 in his own solo series. He started off as a Charlton Comics character, and then when Charlton Comics was bought out by DC Comics, he became a DC Comics character. He's not overly important. He's one of these kind of like Nick Fury type guys where he's just behind the scenes, and every once in a while he pops up and he just kind of serves a higher group, whether it's OMAC or Checkmate or the federal government itself, right? It just kind of switches around. Checkmate is the Maxwell Lord team, by the way. If you don't know who that is, it's not a huge deal. Just a hidden hand out there in the world trying to manipulate manipulate everything that goes on. But what happens is that Sarge Steele kind of comes in and says, look, like the writ that was provided to you guys by the President of the United States was that you guys were going to monitor superhero activity. You were not going to do anything crazy like this. But the response of Amanda Waller is probably the best response that she could get, right? She's like, our remit is whatever I say it is. And I let the president's speech get no further than the Rose Garden. Right now, we control all media. And that's the coolest thing about Amanda Waller. She's like the villain no one ever sees coming. And she's not really a villain per se, but as a just regular person, Amanda Waller is so intriguing because Superman could kill her in any one of 1,000 ways, right? He could just fly down and grab her and throw her into the sun, right? He could just throw her into deep space. He could kick her head off her shoulders if we're a Mr. Sunday Movies video. He could do it in any number of different ways, but like he doesn't, because Amanda Waller is always holding the cards and she's always got a one-up on everybody, right? She's like the J. Edgar Hoover of DC Comics. It's amazing, right? And so because of that, she basically tells Sarge Steele, who says that everything that's going on here is basically disinformation and that ultimately it's working, right? There's a huge uptick across social media when it comes to, superhero paranoia. Waller is a believer, right? She says like calling it disinformation is not really fair. I've said it for years. Superheroes are anything but. They can create more trouble than they avert. They have absolute power and they answer to no one. They adhere to a child's idea of morality, and like all children, they occasionally have tantrums that could turn this world to ash. And she says, I call that information. We're simply reminding people of that fact. And she says, it's unbelievable how wrong the Lex Luthors and the Jokers of the world have gotten it all this time. You don't need fear gas to shift public opinion. You don't need telepathic mind control. In a world run in a media echo chamber, no matter how many busloads of nuns Superman saves, you can make an uncomfortably large number of people doubt their own eyes and ears. All you have to do is refine your message into a memorable catchphrase. Superheroes are coming for you, and repeat it 50,000 times. And she's not wrong, right? Because we as human beings have what's called a negativity bias, right? Because I don't know, like 1,000,000 years ago, two cavemen were walking along a path and they both heard a rustling in the bushes, and the one who ran away lived longer than the one who went to go investigate. And he went back to the tribe and told them what happened, and they all said, we should run away from predators. And ever since then, right, humanity has a built-in negativity bias, right? Stranger danger, different things like that. And so when you kind of bring this scenario to people where you say, like, you see those gods up there listening, what would happen if like they decided to kill us one day? What do we do? How do we stop them, right? That fear begins to take hold. That negativity bias comes to bear. And as a result of that, in times of desperation, people will believe what they want to believe. And so I don't really say that to be like cynical and just be like, the world sucks and is trash. I simply mean to say that like there is an element to us as human beings that sort of lean more towards negativity than positivity, because from an evolutionary perspective, that's how we survive. And so it's really, really interesting when you kind of look at how Amanda Waller navigates this world that she's in and the lengths she's willing to go to. She even shows Sarge Steele like the nature of the Brainiac Queen and everything that goes into it. And that's when Failsafe shows up, right? And he says, winning a war is about keeping the enemy off balance. Did you not stop to think how much power and data it takes to seize half of the internet and mass disperse all that footage? Amanda, it's time for phase 2. And so you do have this moment where Sarge Steele is a little uncomfortable about what's going on, where he's talking to Failsafe, and Failsafe is like, do you have concerns, right? You seem to have doubts. And initially Sarge Steele is like, no, okay, yes, but no, not really, because he says, I swore an oath to protect the United States from all threats, both foreign and domestic. And the reality here is that while superheroes are not a domestic threat now, they could be. And there have been instances in the past where a superhero or even a supervillain has gone rogue. And is there any real differentiation between a superpowered hero and a superpowered villain? That at the end of the day, all we as the normal people are doing is just relying on Superman just choosing not to kill us. That's really all we have, right? That's just the hope he decides not to eradicate us all. And that's just not enough, right? And so it's really, really interesting, right? I love the way this whole thing is written. It's so phenomenal. And so he says, like, this is Amanda's war, and it's been brewing for years, then erupting over just a few weeks. The conflict with Wonder Woman and the Amazons, the Titans seizing military power in the name of heroism, fighting a worldwide crisis they were responsible for. Amanda sees metahumans as self-governing agents of chaos who are as much a threat to humanity as they are a solution. And so in the face of that, if the people who approach you can be your jailer as much as they can be your protector, should you just get rid of them, right? And just be the one who determines your own destiny. So it's really cool. It's really, really fascinating. Like I love the way this story is handled. The kicker here is he says wants or desires. That's the concern, because that's what I can't help being concerned about. A want can be achieved, right? I want $1 million. Cool. I can work for a period of time, invest money over however a length of time it takes, and then have $1 million. But a desire is a void that nothing can ever completely fill. It will always be hungry. And so Amanda Waller desires to destroy superheroes because her desire for that is rooted in something much, much deeper. And simply just destroying superheroes, wiping out superheroes, that's not going to solve it. It's not going to solve the problem. Whatever that problem happens to be, it's always going to be one more thing. And so it's really awesome, right? Because what we find out is you have Failsafe who shows up and he tells Amanda Task Force VII is ready for deployment. Now, Task Force VII is cool because he simply says all we're waiting for is the word, right? And Amanda Waller says the word is given, and the attack immediately goes out. Because in Titan's Tower, you have Cyborg, also known as iPhone. That's what we call him because, you know, guys are walking, talking iPhone. Like, he's immediately overtaken, right, by what appeared to be a firewall, but they're active defenses. And in turn, like, they just shut him down completely. And then Oracle chimes in, right? Barbara Gordon chimes into Batman, and she says the pollution's spreading. Just to accelerate the confusion, we're now seeing fake videos of pundits debating the authenticity of the fake videos that are circulating around the internet. Meanwhile, more heroes are victims of mob violence overseas. Knight and Squire, half the global guardians. Batman, we're doing our best to stop these videos, but we still cannot source them. And so while Batman and Robin are kind of on the hunt, sort of trying to figure out what's going on, you have Nightwing who chimes in for a moment and says, this smells like something Amanda Waller would do, right? A massive misinformation campaign going out there into the world, feeding on the inherent fears, right? Maybe even the subconscious fears of people. If anybody were going to do something like this, it would be Amanda Waller. But the reality here is that it doesn't really make any difference, because whether or not the superheroes are in groups, in teams, whether or not they're by themselves, it doesn't have any bearing. They are all equally taken out because Task Force VII is insanely powerful. In Metropolis itself, kind of switching back to the way we started this video, right, with Superman being shot and just like falling down from the rooftop, then he's rescued by Connor Kent and Jonathan Kent. Of course, Connor being the clone of Superman from his death back in the 1990s, and Jonathan Kent being the biological son of Superman. The problem here is that when they get to him, it's like, okay, how in the world is this happening? Because it's not a kryptonite bullet, right? Like, it's just a bullet from a gun, right, that shot him in the chest. Like, what in the world is going on? But then suddenly, his powers shut down. That's when they realize, like, this is what's happening. Like, his powers are gone. But then their powers shut down, and they end up just crash landing down into the ground. And like, it happens to every single person out there that has powers. And then suddenly, Amanda Waller broadcasts to the world, and she says, good evening, I'm Amanda Waller, and I am here to help. And she says, like all of you, we here at the US Bureau of Sovereignty have been horrified by the now constant danger of devastating metahuman attacks against ordinary citizens. But we need no longer live in fear, not for ourselves, not for our children, not after today. Effective immediately in the wake of these unprecedented superhuman strikes that have claimed so many lives worldwide these last few days, my bureau is actively dispatching our ultimate solution to the existing danger posed by all superhumans. Even as I speak, my designated task force is ending the threat permanently. And here's where things get nuts, because what happens is you switch over to Batman, and as this broadcast goes out, it suddenly dawns on him. It suddenly clicks to him, right? And he was like, there's no way that I could have possibly missed this, right? Like the only way Amanda Waller would ever go this route is if she thinks she's already won. Because remember, Amanda Waller is a character who operates in the shadows until it's time for the killing blow. Then she emerges, right? Then she comes out and she makes her presence known. So the fact that she's already here means it's already game over, because you get an assault on the Flash family, the Flash family loses their super speed, right? They can't run at super speed anymore. And that's where Batman's like, we played right into her hands, because the goal of the superhero community in the face of all this kind of false information was to go out publicly and to demonstrate to the world what they were actually doing, right? That like they were saving people, they were helping people, different things like that. And Batman says like that was the real purpose of the global hack, to lure us all into the open. And he says, I made a massive miscalculation. All this time, I thought Amanda Waller was playing chess, that I could outwit her if I was just clever enough. But she's not playing chess. She's rolling tanks, because what you find out is Task Force VII is Amazos. It's just an army of Amazo robots who are just going out there and sucking away, siphoning away all the superpowers from all the different members of the superhero community. And they literally broadcast out, they say, surrender to us, resistance is pointless. If you have superpowers, we will take them. If you utilize devices, we will drain them. If you use magic, you will no longer remember how to conjure it. But here's the kicker. Here's the weird thing. How in the world were they able to pull that off? It's one thing to say, like, we're going after all the superheroes, right? I mean, that's not an uncommon thing, right? I mean, people go after all the superheroes all the time. And even during the Batman comics, when you got to the end of the Failsafe storyline and all that kind of stuff, that Failsafe didn't know everything about the Justice League. He knew everything Batman knew, but there were some things that Batman didn't know. That was especially important after the Tower of Babel storyline back in the early 2000s when Batman betrayed the Justice League. Then it was kind of like, okay, so the Justice League is not going to give Batman the key to the city. They'll give him the key to like that part of the city over there, but there are some secrets they still keep. They're contained with the one person they would never suspect to ever betray them. Because what happens is Batman broadcasts out and he says, stay connected and wait for further instruction. Waller does not know about this secret frequency that we are all using amongst ourselves in order to communicate. And a voice chimes out of nowhere and says, that's wrong, Batman. And you end up finding out the person who betrayed them all is Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, right? And where Batman's just like, what are you doing? He says, I'm on the right side of history. He says, I'm sorry, I really am, but I've been warning all of you super folks for a long time that us humans do not appreciate being looked down on, and you would not listen to me. Sure, you're great at capping volcanoes, but fixing society's real problems, actually empowering the powerless, affecting real meaningful change, you get an F for effort. And where Batman says, like, this makes no sense, you're supposed to be one of us, the response of Green Arrow is, not anymore, right? He's like, I'm on Team Waller now, and we're coming for you. And so it's crazy, because what he does is he reveals this is much, much bigger than Batman realizes. Green Arrow says, there's nowhere to run, you guys are all done. Waller brokered a deal with the United Planets, so no one gets to leave Earth. There's no space cavalry coming, right? No one gets in, nobody gets out. And even guys like Martian Manhunter, John Jones, which if you read JLA from 1998 by Grant Morrison, is more powerful than Superman. Even this guy is being overtaken by Amazos. They can make themselves invisible, they can hide, all kinds of stuff. And Green Arrow chimes back in and he says, we've sealed away the time stream and the microverse. Waller knows your secrets, so there's no escape, no exit. There is no hope whatsoever. Still, I know you guys, you're thinking we fought Amazos before. If we can figure out how to destroy them, our powers will be restored and we can win. And he says, sorry, but those are the old rules. This is a new design and a new technology. What's taken is irreversible. There is no return mechanism. Your powers are never coming back. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. I told you guys, absolute power is amazing so far. I love it. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace. What's going on, guys? This is Rob. We are back with DC's Absolute Power event, and in this video, DC's God gets killed, And what's crazy is that's the least interesting thing that happens here, if you can believe that. So this initially opens up with a Wonder Woman tie-in of all things. And you've basically got Wonder Woman, Billy Batson, Mary Marvel, Mother Xanadu, John Constantine, Detective Chimp, and then Jim Corrigan, who are all playing cards. And it seems pretty innocuous. Also, is it just me, or does Jim Corrigan look exactly like Jason Blood? Unless I missed something and Jason Blood is the new host for the Spectre in DC. I don't know. The cool thing here is that while they're all playing cards, in the middle of nowhere, an Amazo attacks and starts taking it to everybody. Now, for those of you guys who have not been following Absolute Power, the long and short of it is that Amanda Waller is making her move against all the superheroes on Earth, and she's winning, right? Like, she's winning big time, and the Amazos are the means by which they're doing it. But we also know it's happening by way of Failsafe and Queen Brainiac, which we'll talk about as we get further into this video. The long and short of it is, not only do these Amazos copy powers, they take powers, seemingly steal powers from people. And so when you have like all these beings who are here, none of it makes a difference. The first person that this Amazo goes after is John Constantine, and rightfully so, because people don't realize how powerful John Constantine is. Headcanon here, I'm pretty sure there's stories in DC Comics where Constantine has altered the very fabric of the universe itself using magic. This guy can be nuts at times in DC Comics. Of course, this leads to like Shazam, Mary Marvel, and Wonder Woman jumping into the fray, but like Shazam gets sent flying because now that this Amazo has the power of John Constantine, it can seemingly manipulate and take out virtually anybody. And these are all magically imbued beings who are here, which means it answers the question, what would it look like if like John Constantine decided to kill the DC universe, right? Next up, it's Spectre. Now, Spectre is the embodiment of God's wrath or God's vengeance or God's justice or whatever it is DC wants to call it at that particular point in time, but he's basically an extension of God on Earth. And like, once this happens, Spectre sends the Amazo flying, but Spectre is not accounting for it, because what Spectre does here is he actually kind of steps up to this thing and it says, I am afraid you are mistaken, Metal One. True vengeance comes as lightning, though it seems some are not patient enough to wait for even lightning. And he says that once this thing attacks him, when that happens, the Amazo siphons off the very power of the Spectre itself. Now, this is kind of uncharted water here, right? Because can you siphon off the power of God and steal God's powers? Can that be done? The reality here is that the Spectre is simply just a spirit, right? It inhabits a physical form. You can kill the physical form, then the Spectre has to just jump onto somebody else. But it's weird to see that happen here, and I don't quite know how DC squares this circle. But here's the crazy thing. Mary Marvel and Wonder Woman step up, but because this Amazo now has the power of the Spectre, it immediately incapacitates them right off the bat. So much so that even when Shazam finally returns, it makes no difference, because what happens is that this Amazo seizes the power of Shazam and Mary Marvel and strips them of their abilities, seemingly alongside Wonder Woman. Now, because Wonder Woman's powers are not really magical in nature, which is to say you can't really siphon abilities away from her because they're kind of part and parcel to herself, but we're actually going to see that's not true later on. All this really does is weaken her momentarily, enough to basically allow the Amazo to go after her directly and more likely just take away what we would consider to be the part and parcel aspects of her character. Super strength, super speed, different things along those lines. This does lead Billy and Mary Marvel to flee, and it actually goes directly into the Shazam tie-in as part of Absolute Power, which is really cool because one of these Amazos, that poor soul, it ends up running up on Black Adam, and woe betide that guy, man, because he does not know what he's getting into, and it's amazing. But the reality here is that an attack by Detective Chimp, right, who's just literally a chimpanzee who's a detective, for those of you guys who don't read DC Comics, sentences like these are why I love comic books. This basically leads to like Wonder Woman making her escape, and she takes off. And so what she ends up doing is actually joining up with Superman, Batman, and all those guys, which we'll get to here in a second. The next thing we do is we jump to the Green Lantern tie-in with Green Lantern issue number 13 and the introduction of a whole new Lantern that we've never seen before. Now this picks up with Hal Jordan, the main Green Lantern of DC Comics on Earth, being held captive by Amanda Waller, who's basically pummeling this guy trying to get information out of him. But what's interesting about Green Lantern at the moment is that his tie-in does deal with events here as far as Hal Jordan goes. Everything else is amazing because it really just sort of extends with what's going on with the Green Lantern mythos, and it's kind of a great advertisement for what's happening in the Green Lantern comics, which are amazing right now if you're not reading them. Green Lantern is so incredible. So what it does is it switches over to Jessica Cruz, who is one of the other Green Lanterns on Earth, and she kind of muses to herself about the idea of fear, about how she has a long and very strange relationship with fear. We don't need to go super in-depth into her character. I'll post a link to the playlist in the description of this video if you want to familiarize yourself with the Green Lantern mythos. The important thing about what's happening right now is that the Green Lantern Corps has basically been taken over. Traditionally, it was done by the Guardians of the Universe, and if my memory serves me correctly, they've been gone ever since the most recent Crisis event. And what ended up happening is a new guy named Tharos was put in their place. Tharos was kind of like this benevolent guy who wanted to lead the universe into a better tomorrow. It actually turns out he's pretty nefarious, and what he wants to do is conquer the universe. And so he's bringing in all these different planets and then replacing their leaders with shapeshifters. More so than that, Jessica Cruz, alongside a few of the other Green Lanterns, are actually part of a rebel force working against the main Green Lantern Corps and Tharos himself. The cool thing here is that what they're doing is they're speculating over everything that Tharos could do, what he's shooting for, all that kind of stuff. And Kyle Rayner chimes in and says he's trying to control the emotional spectrum. If you control that, you control the universe, which I don't know if I'm missing something, but when did Kyle Rayner start going down the path of Space Jesus? So, for those of you guys who are a little lost here, I'm going to clear everything up. We are Comics Explained after all. So when it comes to the Green Lantern mythos, because this hasn't been covered in a long time, the cool thing about the Green Lanterns is that it's not just the Green Lanterns. You have the Red Lanterns of Rage, the Sinestro Corps of Fear, so on and so forth. It all comes from the emotional spectrum, right? All these different cores. The idea is that the emotional spectrum is almost sort of part and parcel to the source, which is to say, the reason why everything exists, the very nature of God himself. If you can control the emotional spectrum, you control any and every emotion that exists across the universe and the very fabric of reality itself. There's nothing that you cannot do. There was a point in DC Comics when Kyle Rayner was able to attain and control all the lantern rings that existed out there, the Star Sapphires, the Indigo Tribe, the Black Lanterns of Death, and all that kind of stuff, and he became the White Lantern. Literally, he looked like Jesus. This dude was so overpowered, it was crazy. The White Lanterns are ridiculously OP. I don't even know if we covered that story arc per se. One of the other cool things that we get here, which actually began in Green Lantern issue number 5 of this current run by Jeremy Adams, is Sinestro is a Red Lantern now for all you Red Lantern fans. So this guy's driven by rage and he is immensely powerful. Normally he runs the Sinestro Corps, right? The Yellow Lanterns of Fear. So it's cool to see that shifting around. But following that, and really where it sort of ties into what's going on with absolute power and the things happening on Earth, is that much like the other superheroes that we've seen, that the Amazos are going after the Justice Society of America, specifically Alan Scott, who wields the power of the Starheart. Now, the cool thing about the Starheart is that because Alan Scott, as a character, was published by DC Comics long before the invention of Hal Jordan and the expansion of the Green Lantern mythos, DC had to find a way to consolidate the way his power was originally given to us with the way they changed things following the introduction of Hal Jordan and everything that Jeff Johns even did some, I don't know, was it 70 years later or 50 years later during his run and that kind of thing. The long and short of this is that unlike Hal Jordan or John Stewart or Kyle Rayner or any of the other Green Lanterns, that Alan Scott does not derive his power from the emotional spectrum of willpower. Instead, what he does is he channels what's called the Starheart. It's basically a source of energy that was initially created by the Guardians of the Universe in the very early days as a kind of prototype to what would become the central power battery of the Green Lantern Corps, the means by which willpower is was channeled from the emotional spectrum. So it's just kind of a way for DC to say that, like, if all the other Green Lanterns die, Alan Scott could remain and he could probably find some way to save them or something along those lines, right? It's also what makes him unique and maintains that role that, like, he was before all the other Green Lanterns. What sucks here is that Jesse Quick comes running up on this Amazo trying to find a way to stop it, and he seizes control of her, and that means that he now has access to the speed force of the Flashes. And while Jessie is not nearly as fast as someone like Wally West or Barry Allen, she's fast enough. So now, this Amazo has super speed in addition to the power of Alan Scott. What's cool about this is that because Alan Scott wields the power of the Starheart, the power is seemingly in and unto himself. So he's actually able to pull it back from the Amazo and channel it back into his ring, which is dope. The problem is that they're all basically captured by Amanda Waller and taken to Amanda Waller's headquarters, which means now they can be used. Here's the crazy thing about the Lantern that we've never seen before. So as part of Jeremy Adams' run on the Green Lantern mythos, what we did is we saw that Hal Jordan was out doing his thing and then was eventually reunited with Carol Ferris. That matters because Carol Ferris was his on-again, off-again girlfriend, and I don't remember if they ever got married at one point in time, but Carol did wield the power of the Star Sapphires, basically the Lantern core that tapped into the love aspect of the emotional spectrum. Now, once the Green Lantern run was initiated and Hal Jordan was just back to the way he'd always been, operating on Earth as a pilot and doing his Green Lantern stuff during the more recent run, Carol was just kind of there, but she was with a guy named Nathan Allen Broom. And what ended up happening here is she broke it off and went back to Hal Jordan. And when I say broke it off, I mean, like, they were married and she went back to Hal Jordan. The reason why this is so cool is because Nathan gives us this really interesting monologue where he says that for my entire life, I did what I was told. I went to school, I got good grades, I made my parents proud. At every turn, I'd see the rule breakers get ahead of me. They'd get the promotion, the money, the girl. And I thought it was just a matter of time. I'd do okay if I kept working hard, doing what's right, and then I met Carol, the one I wanted to marry to spend my life with. But she disappeared in a flash of color, and I was left with nothing but a deep sadness, nothing but sorrow. And so Nathan ends up becoming the Sorrow Lantern. Now, what his powers are, we don't know. This dude just popped up. The most likely ability that he has is to go on Reddit and just complain about how life's not fair, but he probably has other cool powers as well, hard-like constructs and different things like that. And so what we do following this is we switch over to the Superman tie-in for absolute power, which is also incredibly amazing. So, as you guys saw with our previous coverage of the absolute power event, Superman was one of the first to fall in the sense that, like, his power was being siphoned off by the Amazos just long enough for him to be shot. Now, it wasn't enough to strip his power entirely. He was saved before that happened. But what you end up getting is Superman being brought to the Fortress of Solitude and being worked on by basically Mr. Terrific, right? Michael Holt, who's cool. And I'm so glad to see this dude is getting, like, some accurate representation in media in, like, the Superman film, as opposed to the one that we saw in The Flash. He wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the Mr. Terrific that I had just come to know and love over the course of DC Comics. But there's also this kind of musing that goes back and forth, right? Why do we need the Kryptonite scalpel? Well, because Kryptonite's the only thing that can weaken Superman enough for us to be able to, like, cut into him and that sort of thing. What it also does is it shows us that the Amazos are traveling around the United States and basically doing Amanda Waller's bidding, right? Finding superheroes, implementing a curfew for general society, all that kind of stuff, right? If you have no superpowers and you are not a vigilante, you have nothing to worry about, right? That sort of thing. But all of this is really just sort of following the efforts of Zatanna, who's almost on a kind of rescue mission of sorts with Mercy, right? The two of them basically escaping. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Zatanna's really interesting. She was never my favorite character, but she's basically a practitioner of magic, but all the spells and everything that she casts, she says the words backwards, which is one of the reasons why I wasn't the biggest fan. It can make it really hard to follow her character whenever she's, like, casting spells and stuff. The other character here, Mercy, she's a little more interesting. So Mercy was at one point, if I recall correctly, the assistant or something like that to Lex Luthor, but she was exposed to the Lazarus effect effect, basically meaning she's been granted powers. And what it did is it turned her into a living suit of armor. So she can do all kinds of really cool stuff. She's not human, but she looks human. Now, how long that stays, I don't necessarily know, but she does have some cool moments here, because what's basically going on is that with Zatanna being rescued by Mercy, she's brought to the Fortress of Solitude, the one place that Amanda Waller would not be stupid enough to try to attack if she even really knew where it was. But the idea here is that those individuals who still have powers are being rescued and consolidated in this location, what few are left. And there is some bickering that goes back and forth, but of course, Superman finally emerges from his surgery, for lack of a better word, donning his black costume, which is usually what Superman does after he sustains some kind of an injury, right? Like he dons a costume. And then in turn, he just kind of starts telling people, like, I need to know where my son is. I need to know where Jonathan Kent is, because he is every bit as powerful as his father. The reality here is that Mercy was supposed to be on a mission to try to find them. She ended up basically saving Superman, but couldn't save John. And where she considers it a bit of a failure, right? The response to Superman is, no, you did the best you could. That's all any of us can ask. Don't really beat yourself up. The other part of this is that traveling around the world because of what's happening right now and trying to rescue different superheroes that have not been snatched up by Amanda Waller is a very, very dangerous ordeal. Not only because the Amazos would be going after these different superheroes, but because it could lead to collateral damage, right? Like innocent people being caught in the attack. Because while Amanda Waller isn't really going after regular people, as far as collateral damage goes, she's like, hey, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Might as well go for broke. And so with this realization, Zatanna chimes in and she says, okay, here's the rub. Let's start using what are basically called the dark roads, which are these kind of paths in between different places that exist out there in the world. So it's almost like the bleed, which is to say the space between universes, except it's on a far more local scale. But she says they're incredibly dangerous, right? They're invisible to nearly everyone, and you don't have to have magical abilities to traverse them. That normal people get pulled into them all the time. That's where stories about haunted streets and crossroads, it's where they all come from. She says the point is we can use them to transport people to operate in the shadows. The issue is we have to find the map of Mordru, and God forbid it lies with Mordru himself. Because let me tell you guys something. I know a lot of you guys don't know about the character of Mordru. Maybe you do. This dude is one of the most powerful and evil beings to ever exist in the history of DC Comics. And maybe we'll cover him, right? We should make a video on that guy because he's absolutely nuts. Mordru's dope, right? He existed before the universe came into existence, and he'll exist after, right? There really is no defeating or destroying this guy. He just jumps from one host body to the next, not that dissimilar to Oblivion in Marvel Comics. And so ultimately, they all just agree to do it. But the question is, how do they access it? And that's where Zatanna says that the Dark Road responds to certain things, death being a good one. The fact that you've died before, which not really, he was just in a Kryptonian healing matrix, and the fact that he almost died now means Superman is best suited to be the one to enter the Dark Roads and lead a mission to basically start gathering people. The funny thing here is none of that's going to make a difference, because what's going to happen is they're going to choose a wholly different path. And so that leads us into the final part of this video, which is absolute power number 2. And this is cool, right? We're only 2 issues in to the main event itself, and all of this has happened so far, right? So what Amanda Waller says is superheroes by the dozens, detained and beaten, treated like the criminals they are, held permanently under lock and key. I feel safer already. And so she asks, what's the current success rate of Task Force VII? And the statement that's made is that Task Force VII is performing admirably, right? 80% of all the superheroes across the world have been depowered and incarcerated. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out is over the course of Absolute Power, there is an actual limited series called Task Force VII. It largely focuses on smaller guys, right? Smaller teams, smaller superheroes who exist out there that normally wouldn't get a whole lot of attention. It's okay. It's not overly interesting. Maybe a couple of them are worth covering, but that is something to be aware of in all of this. The other part is that Queen Brainiac says, would not the next logical step step be to lure them into the open, perhaps by targeting the humans they care for, companions, loved ones. And under normal circumstances, Amanda Waller would do that, but she says those humans are civilians. Our goal here is to protect ordinary people and keep them safe. I'm not a sociopath. Now again, what's going on here is we're talking about Amanda Waller, Failsafe, and Queen Brainiac. I'll give you a quick and dirty explanation here, but if you want to know more about them, I will have the playlist at the end of this video that basically gives you all the lead up to absolute power, as well as the first part that basically explains everything that's going on here. But in effect, Failsafe was a robot created by Batman himself, albeit by way of an alternate personality that we don't have to go into here, that was designed to activate if Batman ever killed anybody. It was believed Batman killed the Penguin, so of course, Failsafe activated. Now, Failsafe is working for Amanda Waller. Queen Brainiac came out of the House of Brainiac crossover in the Superman comics, where Brainiac had basically created a wife for himself. Brainiac was ultimately defeated, and Queen Brainiac was thought to be destroyed. Instead, her programming and everything was wiped, and so when she arrived, or at least crash landed back on Earth, Amanda Waller took Queen Brainiac and then basically mentally conditioned her as best you can with the robot, and now she's loyal to Amanda Waller. So that's kind of how this is all unfolding with these guys. But with those two at her side, Failsafe is the one who can design all these new Amazos. Queen Brainiac is the one that makes them as powerful as they are. So it all kind of comes together. But beyond that, you switch back over to the Fortress of Solitude, where Superman is there just kind of mulling over the fact that basically Amanda Waller has John, that Amanda Waller has a son. He's sort of panicking here, doesn't quite know how to cope with things as you would expect. And then all the superheroes start bickering with one another over who's going to be leading the charge and whose plan they're going to follow. And then Nightwing steps up. And people who are fans of Nightwing, I know this was your moment in this story, because you guys love Nightwing, and it's awesome the way he's written here. He says, "For those of you who may not know, my name is Nightwing, and these are the Titans. We're going to get through this because we know something Amanda Waller does not, what we're capable of. She thinks we'll fold without super strength or heat vision or power rings. Please, we couldn't if we wanted to. Villains always believe their motives are universal. The only one Waller understands is her lust for authority and domination. She will never hear the call of selflessness. She will never recognize the will and the commitment of each and every one of us to protect the helpless, to fight against injustice and tyranny regardless of the odds. And that will be her downfall." And so immediately Nightwing takes control, and he says, "We have to run under Waller's radar," which means we'll be breaking into small teams. Most of the Titans are still powered for now, so they'll run defense for you. Batman, you say Waller has a mother box, the key to accessing the powers of the new gods, i.e. Darkseid, right? Go and get it, because if she unleashes Darkseid on Earth, believing she can manipulate and control him, she's in for a whole new rude awakening. Not only will he kill her, he'll kill us all, right? So like, we don't need that kind of stress in our lives, right? She don't want that smoke. He says, "Superman, the multiverse is full of allies who will help us without a moment's hesitation. Find them." Ladies and gentlemen, as soon as I saw this, I was so excited. I was like, bro, is it happening? Is it happening? Dude, are we gonna get it, man? You guys know what, y'all know what I'm talking, son. Man, let me tell you something. Y'all know what I'm talking about, man. Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot. I love Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot's a super bunny. I love Captain Carrot so much. He's my favorite character in comics. Dude is amazing. But the next thing he says is Green Arrow is now working for Waller. That gives her an enormous well of information on us because he knows everything about us. Black Canary, pull together a squad to relocate and retrieve him. Wonder Woman, I want information on exactly where Waller is holding her prisoners, and I want them freed. Superman, you had something you wanted to say. The response to Superman here is, this fortress is impregnable. We'll use it as our base of operations. It's got armories, it's got armor, the whole 9 yards, everything we'll need. Nobody would be foolish enough to break into this place. What happens next? Wow! Right? The doors get blown off this thing, and here comes Queen Brainiac with Jonathan, who's been turned into basically an agent of Brainiac. It's like Future's End, but not garbage. It's amazing because Superman's just like, what has she done to you, right? Like, what's going on? Jonathan immediately unleashes on all the superheroes and almost takes these guys out in one fell swoop. Superman's distracted. He doesn't know how to handle all of this. Queen Brainiac takes it to every single one of these guys. They thought fighting the Amazos was hard. They have nothing on her because in an instant, right? Wonder Girl Cassie Sandsmark, Red Tornado, Wonder Woman, all these guys are immediately taken over by her. And while they are basically liberated by Batman, who's able to assist as best he can, the major threat here is Jonathan, because Superman is trying to reason with his son. Now, there is a superhero here by the name of Dreamer, who's able to quote-unquote dreamwalk, basically enter in and out of virtually any environment as she sees fit, almost like a combination of Nightcrawler's ability to teleport and Kitty Pryde's ability to phase in and out of objects, but essentially she was really the means by which they were able to break into this facility in the first place. But the fact is, she doesn't really matter here, and you'll see why once we get to the end of this video. The important thing is not only is Queen Brainiac now here alongside Jonathan, Amazos are entering the fray. And Amazos, these guys are using the powers they've stolen, right? The power of the Green Lanterns, different things like that. It starts to heal itself from different attacks, so on and so forth. It's bonkers. What ends up happening here is that in his fight with Jonathan Kent, Superman fails to realize that Wally West has arrived on the scene, and that while Wally isn't a bad guy here, he's showing up with the only means presumably by which to defeat Jonathan, which is green kryptonite. It'll take them both out. You also get this amazing moment with Batman where he's like taken by one of the Amazos, and the Amazos just like, Batman, you begat Failsafe, who in turn begat me. Hello, grandfather. What fancy toys does this batsuit hide? He's like, ultrasonics, and never call me that, and just like takes down the Amazo. And so that's where you get like Blue Beetle Ted Kord and Michael Holt, who are just like the Phantom Zone projector, right? Normally you send people into the Phantom Zone as a prison. If we activate the Phantom Zone projector, we can go there and they can't access us, right? We can regroup, we can figure out what happens next. All of this is being watched by Dreamer, who's sort of just flabbergasted because she's been working for Amanda Waller this entire time, albeit to basically keep her family safe, right? So she was doing it against her will. She's not a straight up bad guy, but she tells Amanda Waller, like, this is too much, even for you, right? Like, laying waste to the superheroes like this in a sneak attack. Like, what are you thinking? Now, Superman is able to momentarily break through and get to John directly. So there is a piece of John left in there, but it's not enough because he's just like, Dad, there's only one way to end this. And Superman's just like, tell me, John, like, what is it we have to do? And John says, you have to join us, and immediately seizes control of Superman. At the moment that happens, Queen Brainiac breaks the bottled city of Kandor. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Kandor was a city on Krypton that was shrunk down and bottled by Brainiac before Krypton exploded. But within the bottled city of Kandor are all these Kryptonians, when they're exposed to yellow sun radiation, gain the powers of Superman. And with her having no idea what she's doing, Aquaman shows up here on the scene, which is really kind of weird, and shatters the glass bottle. What that does is it unleashes all these mini Kryptonians who are in there that immediately start attacking Queen Brainiac. It's not enough to kill her, but it is enough to offer some measure of distraction while everybody else makes their escape. Because what happens after that is Wally West snatches up Jonathan Kent and then just rides off, literally takes off, while things start going sideways and everything starts exploding. And so with Superman realizing there is no way out, there is no saving this here, right? Like, the mission's lost. This dude turns into Hicks from Aliens, right? Marines, we are leaving! Like, he's just like, this is Identifier, Kal-El, enact Protocol Black Zero, initiate self-destruct. He goes to blow up the Fortress of Solitude, right? So within the span of 10 seconds, Queen Brainiac seizes control of Superman, tries to destroy Superman after using red sun radiation to basically basically weaken all the little Kryptonians that were attacking her. And then Dreamer shows up, realizing if Queen Brainiac gets her hands on Superman, and Superman is taken by Amanda Waller and turned into one of her Amazo agents, it's game over for everybody, right? Everybody gets defeated. Dreamer shows up here, incapacitates Queen Brainiac, which allows Superman to jump through the Phantom Zone projector. Everything gets blown to pieces, and Jonathan is just there, right? And for a moment, he's his normal self. He's like, oh my God, Dad, like, what did I just do? Like, what have I done? There is a bit of discussion from the forces of Amanda Waller, which are just like, well, Queen Brainiac's dead, but the response of Waller is, you underestimate how powerful she is. I wouldn't ally myself with someone so easily defeated. Queen Brainiac basically reactivates and then seizes control of Jonathan Kent, brings him back under her programming, and then Amanda Waller chimes in and says, Jonathan remains under the Queen Brainiac's full control. The fugitives will be found. Remember, the boy has super senses. Trust me, wherever they fled, they cannot hide from a Kryptonian. And so the question's asked, what did they do about Oliver Queen? Because Oliver Queen is on their side. But what Oliver Queen doesn't seem to know are all the superhero casualties that are happening out there. All his friends, and by extension, members of his family, or at least his superhero family, are being killed or being captured, transformed, any number of things. And so Amanda's just like, don't worry about that, right? Like, this whole thing's need to know, have them do busy work. Only for us to find out that Oliver Queen is digging through all these little artifacts that belong to captured members of the Justice League as part of this busy work, and he comes across an hourglass. Now, some of you guys out there would be like, well, I mean, that's clearly an artifact that belongs to our man, and it probably has no significance. Nope. I would say that probably belongs to Kronos, right? The Clinton version. And if that's true, while Clinton didn't really have any powers to speak of, he was a technological genius. And you know what Clinton worked on? Time travel. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. This story is amazing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Make sure you check this link to the playlist if you need to get caught up, and I will catch you all later. Peace. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and it is Tuesday, which means we are back with DC Comics' Absolute Power event. And this is the Batman tie-in, which is where we kick things off. And what this does is this picks up with Batman going and meeting with Cyborg. Now, of course, as you guys know from the Absolute Power storyline, it's basically Amanda Waller rounding up all the superheroes across the world. It's a pretty straightforward and simple plot. It's just how it goes down that makes things really, really cool. And Cyborg is one of the more important members of the Justice League. I know I make fun of him all the time. I call him iPhone for two reasons. One, because, you know, he's a technological powerhouse within the Justice League mythos. And two, because it's always the same thing every year, only the camera changes. But the kicker here, right, is that Cyborg is in a lot of ways a necessity. Because when it comes to Amanda Waller tracking down all these superheroes, there isn't a whole lot to go on in the way of them, like, communicating with each other and talking with each other. Cyborg is one of the very few ways in which they're able to do this. Not only that, it's all the technology he can hack into, databases, things like that, letting the different superheroes know where these individuals are being held captive, potentially orchestrating a prison break. There's a lot that he can do, but knowing that Amanda Waller is going to go after him, one of the things that had happened is that a virus had been unleashed, which basically starts to take over Cyborg with the attempt of shutting him down. The bigger point to all of this is that Cyborg realizes that Amanda Waller is messing with powers that she doesn't understand, because what he says is he's detecting a strong power source. It's in the south of Gamorra, and he realizes it's a mother box. The problem is that in the middle of all of this, one of the Amazos attack. And again, the other videos that we'll have linked at the end of this video will basically get you caught up in everything. But the Amazos historically copy the powers of superheroes. Under Amanda Waller, they steal the powers of superheroes. And so when Batman's facing off against this Amazo, it's actually the one that's modeled after Wonder Woman. Now, here's the cool thing, is that as an aside here, a lot of people are dismissive of Wonder Woman. They don't really take her that seriously or anything like that. If you read the story Wonder Woman, A League of One, and Wonder Woman Hikatea, both of which were written by Greg Rucka, we covered both of those stories, that will eliminate that misconception quick, fast, and in a hurry, because she's amazing. And so in Hikatea, for example, she beat the crap out of Batman, which is exactly what's going on here, right? That, like, literally Batman is just kind of fighting for his life, trying to stay alive against this thing. Because one of the things to really wonder is, if Amanda Waller got her hands on Batman, what would happen, right? Does she just have the world's greatest detective? Or does she now have access to like everything that Batman has access to? The Batcave, the Batmobile, the Batwing, all that kind of stuff. Is his identity as Bruce Wayne just a matter of her deciding to pull his cowl off his head and that's it? I mean, what happens, right? So there's a lot to lose if Batman's captured by Amanda Waller, to say nothing of his ability to organize the Justice League and the remaining superheroes that have not been captured yet. The downside to all of this is that where Batman is just kind of sent flying, this allows the Amazo to capture Cyborg, and Cyborg is whisked away. And so Batman doesn't necessarily give up, but what he realizes here is that the Mother Box is now their main priority, because if Amanda Waller starts messing with this, she will inadvertently open a portal to Apocalypse and Darkseid. And if that happens, it's game over, son, right? If Darkseid gains access to the main DC universe, superheroes being quote-unquote a danger to society is the least of Amanda Waller's problems. She'll get the world killed, right? It's crazy how nuts and powerful Darkseid is. One of the other cool things that goes on here, and I love the way that this is handled, because the Flash moves so incredibly fast, in the absence of someone like Martian Manhunter, the Flash is running between the superheroes and talking to everybody, right? Relaying messages back and forth. It's a really, really cool thing. I don't really know if I've seen this done before in DC Comics, and while it's not huge, it's a pretty genius maneuver. But again, because the main emphasis here is on the Mother Box, you essentially have Batman who communicates this to Superman. Now, this goes directly into Absolute Power number 2, which we've already covered, but a lot of you guys were asking how it was that they knew about Amanda Waller having a Mother Box. This is the answer to that question, right? So what the Batman story does at this point is it switches over to the pursuit of this Mother Box. What's interesting about this, and I don't entirely know how I feel about this, but I guess given the limited number of superheroes that are left, there really aren't a whole lot of options here. Batman ends up making the decision to go with Catwoman. And it's an interesting choice, again, because he says, like, I need a thief, somebody capable of breaking into different places. Now, that is kind of a cool thing that you see here at DC that you don't often see in Marvel Comics, which is to say, in Marvel, most superheroes stay in their lane. Spider-Man deals with his rogues gallery in New York. Captain America faces off against whoever he's fighting at that point in time. The X-Men are dealing with the whole of humanity. In DC Comics, it's not that uncommon to see someone like Catwoman, who's really billed as a cat burglar, breaking into like these high security systems that belong to people like Amanda Waller or the Suicide Squad or something like that. So in a lot of ways, the shared universe component in DC is felt a lot more than it is in Marvel Comics. And as a guy who's been reading Marvel for like 20-something years, I feel like that's a pretty strong statement to make. But the fact is, he needs her to break into the facility so they can attain this Mother Box. Now, the other part of this isn't simply just to stop, some potential invasion from Darkseid. It's also because if they have a Mother Box at their disposal, that grants all kinds of possibilities. Because one of the things to know, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with Mother Boxes and Darkseid and things like that in DC Comics, Darkseid exists outside the multiverse, right? Which is to say, like, he can access any universe at any particular point in time. A Mother Box is the means by which he does it. Why does this matter? Because as we know, Superman has a mission of going into the multiverse to get like other recruits, people to help them out. Fingers crossed, guys. We get to see Captain Carrot. I really hope we get to see him. But a Mother Box is a means to achieve this goal, right? Just jumping into the multiverse, and who knows what kind of forces would come back. I'm kind of excited to see how things go here, but that's really the reason I imagine for Batman pursuing this thing. The other part of this is that the base they're going into is not just some arbitrary military base that's out there. And in fact, we're going to find out that Amanda Waller has gone to great lengths in order to keep this Mother Box secure and safe. And one of the things she has stationed here is her Suicide Squad, which seemingly also has Bizarro. Now, I am a little behind on the Bizarro mythos in DC Comics, but last I saw, Bizarro was in the Superman story that we covered, right? Jason Aaron's inaugural run. And he had the ability to use magic and different things like that, but I thought he was destroyed. Like, I thought Bizarro was like incinerated, completely obliterated. I could be wrong, and DC may have brought him back in a story that I'm not overly familiar with. So if you guys watching this video know what comic I'm missing, let me know. I'd like to kind of just read it for my own personal enjoyment here. But Batman and Catwoman showing up here and encountering the Suicide Squad wasn't really something that they intended on doing, but it's not really enough for them to like dissuade the mission, right? Let's kind of walk away from from it all. Because Batman fighting the Suicide Squad is kind of cool to see, to be honest with you guys. And as you guys know, the Suicide Squad, of course, are basically villains that have been brought in by Amanda Waller to function as a team, usually on suicide missions, in order to either have time reduced from their prison sentence or the safety of their family, or because Amanda Waller just needs cannon fodder for a particular mission. So that's why you end up getting guys like Clock King, different things along those lines. But Batman overpowers these guys quite readily. One of the cool things that does happen, though, is he comes across Deadeye, and he says, this is Amanda Waller's newest recruit, her nephew, according to Batwing. He knows how to fight. Physically charged strikes may take a bit to subdue. Selina knows the plan, though. Move on the target with or without me. And so it's interesting that Batman doesn't necessarily fight like evenly with Deadeye. I mean, he overtakes this guy like that, right? I mean, it happens quickly. But it is cool to see that, like, despite how capable Batman is, that DC loves to throw in these moments where it's like, yeah, man, Batman's really capable. He's a really good fighter, but like this dude over here is almost as good. And there are times when they can take Batman out. I just love those small little things that go on there. While Batman overpowers Deadeye and has every intention of like moving on to join Selina Kyle and attaining this mother box, he ends up facing off against Bizarro. And this is cool, man, because Batman kind of gives us this inner monologue that for a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the character sort of fill in the gaps on what the nature of Bizarro is, right? A twisted version of Superman. And it looks like he's been enhanced. Brainiac tech. I can do my best, but I won't stand a chance one-on-one in a fight. I need to find a way to be able to overcome him. But Bizarro literally overpowers Batman pretty quickly, which is exactly what you would expect, right? Despite the fact that he's sort of a twisted and backwards version of Superman, he's every bit as powerful and capable. And so what he does is Batman starts talking to Bizarro in a way that kind of manipulates him and gets him to go onto a different attack, right? He says he's simple like a child and all children just want to play. So that's why he says, Bizarro need kill me so me can help you work. And Bizarro says like, Bizarro hate work, let's work. And so one of the things to know whenever Bizarro talks is always assume he's saying the opposite of whatever is he's saying. For those of you guys who are not familiar with this character. So instead of Batman saying like, Bizarro needs to kill me, he's like, Bizarro does not need to kill me so me can help you work so that you don't have to work. That kind of thing, right? So it's always kind of backwards in terms of what he's saying. And so that's why when you see like Bizarro momentarily distracted, Selina Kyle chimes into Batman and is like, you need to get here as soon as you possibly can. And so of course, Batman catches up to Selina, but there is a kind of concern along the way that like something may have happened to her because she's just not really responding to his, calls and things like that. What is kind of funny here is this is supposed to be a secret mission. So Batman is in effect running through the halls of this military base, screaming Selina's name into the ether. So much for sleuth and being a detective, right? But once he gets into the room, what they realize is that the mother box has already been activated and a boom tube is open. Now again, this is a concern because nobody knows where it leads to. And that's the danger of mother boxes. You walk into an open boom tube with no indication of where it's going to send you to. It could send you to a place with no oxygen and you just suffocate and die. It could send you to a dimension of eternal darkness that there's no escape from, or it could send you to dark side. There's all kinds of possibilities here. And so it's really just a leap of faith, right? Their need to attain the mother box that Amanda Waller has is really more important than anything. And so at the end of the day, Batman tells Selina, look, this is a journey I need to make on my own because I don't know if I'm able to keep you safe here. But her response is like, fat chance, right? If I go, you go. And like the two of them jump into that box. And then they just sort of end up in this place where the mother box is just sort of sitting there. Now, of course, being in a glass case, it's way too easy to believe that it's just there with no real security or anything whatsoever. But as Batman starts moving around, what he realizes here is that it's not just a quote-unquote facility or museum, it's a family tomb, specifically for Amanda Waller, that she's from Chicago, little things like that. Now, what's really cool about Absolute Power, and this is one of the things that we haven't talked about so far, there is Absolute Power Origins, which is kind of a limited series as part of this event, and that covers the origin of Amanda Waller, which I'm kind of amazed has never been done so far. So if you guys are interested in that, we can cover the origin of Amanda Waller. I don't know how many people are interested in that. I don't really know if there's just enough interest to even warrant covering it at all, but let me know what you guys guys think down in the comments, right? If you guys are interested in seeing something like that. But as Batman makes his way outside of this tomb, he realizes they're on like a chunk of land that's just kind of been cut out, right? That Amanda Waller is taking these little keepsakes from her life, showing that she does have a sort of soft spot for like her own family history, things like that. But then Batman realizes that they're actually on Zarnia, right? They're literally on the home planet of Lobo after seemingly the entire race has been eradicated. So the concern is like, how do they even get back, right? Like, how do they get back to where they were? Well, of course, the mother box there is the key, but before they're able to even break into it, the alarm goes off, right? So Selina Kyle doesn't have a way to access this thing, and the rest of the Suicide Squad shows up, led by Brainiac, which seemingly it's curtains for these two. But before we get into that, which is where we in the Batman tie-in, because now we switch over to Green Lantern. It's a pretty massive cliffhanger for what's going on with Batman. But picking up with this, in the last video that we did where we talked about what Green Lantern was doing, Hal Jordan was just escaping captivity from Amanda Waller and trying to regain his Green Lantern ring. Now, of course, the ring isn't really charged at the moment, and so while he's going through this facility with all these different weapons and things along those lines, what he ends up doing is just facing off against these guards where he can, when he can, because despite having his ring, it does need to be charged. He has to find his battery. The other part of this is that the central power batteries of all the Lantern cores are basically out of commission, and we'll talk more about that as we get further into the story, specifically when it gets to Tharos, because that's really where things get interesting and get cool here. And so while he's bobbing and weaving and on the move, the story switches over to Alan Scott. Now, Alan Scott, personality-wise, is in a lot of ways very different from Hal Jordan. He's a lot more kind of like your dad or your granddad if he were wielding a Green Lantern ring. But this is what I'm talking about here, when he's basically being held captive and he's playing chess with one of the Amazos. He says, I was taken prisoner. No, that's not true. I allowed myself to be taken prisoner after I had my power stolen by this thing, this quote-unquote being, a mechanized creature on the cusp of consciousness. And the Amazo says, it is your move. And the response of Alan Scott is, it is, isn't it? This is the Amazo robot Waller sent after me. But what she didn't know and couldn't know is that would it absorbed part of my Starheart energy, it might have done something else. It might have given itself free will. I've come to call this thing Jadestone. Now, here's an important thing to understand here. Depending on how this story unfolds, it could very well be that this guy Jadestone ends up becoming part of the Justice Society of America. That's usually what happens whenever Marvel or DC Comics introduces a character that appears to be a villain and they give it an actual name, that's the name it'll start using going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And truth to tell, I'm not overly against it, because what it does is that we move away from this monologue and focus on a conversation between the two, where Alan Scott says 3 moves, where Jadestone says, your processor is slow. I have already determined that you will lose in 3 moves. And Alan Scott's just kind of like, I figured 4, but you would know, wouldn't you? And where the Amazo says yes, it pauses for a second, and then it asks, if you knew you would lose, why do you play? And the response of Alan is, because sometimes there is joy in the game, in making your own choices. And the Amazo observes this and then internalizes what he said and says choices are merely programmed responses. And then in turn, Alan makes this amazing statement where he says, if that is true, then nothing in this universe matters. But I don't believe you believe that, or you wouldn't be here playing a game with me. Now, of course, this leads to the Amazo basically leaving because of everything going on with Hal Jordan, but it is a really, really cool discussion here. But going into this idea of the two of them playing chess, there is no guaranteed outcome, right? This is not like Go, where there's thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe even an infinite number of moves that a person could make. There is going to be one definitive winner over a relatively short amount of time. And depending on how good you are, you can see several moves ahead. But in being able to predict the moves of other people, and then with Alan Scott countering this argument and saying, because this game has a bit of unpredictability to it, you're playing this game not knowing if you're going to win or lose, but you play it anyway. He's teaching this thing free will. It's cool. But switching over to Hal Jordan here, again, this guy's just fleeing. He jumps over this box and he's just looking for some kinds of arms and armament, and he comes across like the Condiment King's guns, right? He's like, all right, man, it'll have to do. The Jordan luck strikes again. So while these guys are like approaching him, right, with these machine guns and stuff, Hal Jordan comes jumping over the box and starts spraying these guys down with spicy mustard and ketchup. I love it. I am here for it. It's like one of the best things that I've seen in comics for a long time. But that's all he's doing, man. He's like kicking over the lids of boxes, grabbing whatever weapons he can, throwing them at these guys, and then suddenly a hard-like construct forms and it shuts down his ability to access this weapon. And that's when the Amazo is there, right? It just says, by order of Amanda Waller, you are under arrest. And so this is when we switch over to the Great Hall of Oa, which again is traditionally where the Guardians of the Universe reside, but is currently being occupied by Tharos, and what is in effect the League of Planets, right? By all standards of measurement. Technically, it's the United Planets Council, but still, one of the things that happens here, and the way this conversation unfolds, is it shines Tharos in the kind of light that you wouldn't expect. He's not just some arbitrary villain of the week, because in this conversation, Tharos says, we are almost finished. And one of the guys says, Hal Jordan is still out there. He knows what we are. And the response of Tharos is, Hal Jordan will no longer be a problem, my esteemed ambassador from Ran. I've been told he's been neutralized, leaving the United Planets Council to go back to the important work of safeguarding the galaxy. Another guy chimes in and he says, I admit you have done more than anyone of our race could have imagined, Lord Premier Tharos, but at what cost? We've destroyed the batteries of Oa. We alone can manipulate the emotional spectrum with the power of the Source Lantern. But if the races of the United Planets found out that we were masquerading as their ambassadors, it would be all-out war. I suggest we use the unseeing, basically telepaths, for lack of a better word. We mind wipe the captured ambassadors that we imitate and then revel in our security. Essentially, nobody would know what's going on. There's no concern about an ambassador escaping or being rescued, and then word getting out to all these different planets that the people who are pretending to be their ambassadors are actually just shapeshifters, right? And they've been duped this entire time. But Tharos counters and he says, there is no security. How many times have the Owens been defeated? How many times has a great evil appeared out of nowhere to wipe out the universe? How many times have those with power thought that they were safe? No, we will continue. We must continue. Our council will build up such a force that no one would dare glare in our direction. But again, it's cool because Tharos says Earth is a blue speck in the infinite cosmos. Now they struggle to stop themselves from falling apart. When the time is right, we will give them the choice we have given so many others: obey or die. And so the question is asked, like, we did not do this to be murderers. And that's where Tharos says, then gird yourself, Farron, for we will be called much worse by those we've defeated. But take heart, for our homeworld will call us heroes. And so again, it's really awesome to see it kind of play out this way. But jumping back over to Hal Jordan, of course, he just kind of takes off and just like tries to run away from this Amazo. He tries to attack it where he can using whatever's available to him, but for the most part, there really isn't a whole lot he can do. And so what he says here is a crazed, overgrown robot is about to squash me into the ground, and the only weapon around me seems to be these stupid stick things. Maybe I can distract it. What I wouldn't give for Clark to be here. Heck, I'd even take Bruce. But all I have is a stick, which I hope belongs to... And then he basically just like blasts this thing, right? He just says like abracadabra. And what it does is it teleports him away, because abracadabra in DC Comics, which I know it's very much on the nose for a character to be named Abracadabra, but he's a practitioner of magic. And so basically Hal Jordan is teleported away, and he's teleported directly to Themyscira, which is the superhero resistance headquarters, where you have Batman and Wonder Woman and Superman. Again, like this takes place seemingly after the events of Batman 151, and most likely it takes place after 152. That's one of the things that I do want to specify here. Whenever it comes to these major crossover events, for reasons that I'll never fully understand, comic book publishers, Marvel and DC, they do not release these comics in a reading order. They just have their own publishing order based on the existing publishing schedule for comic books. So that's why it's not uncommon to see something like this, where like Batman is here, but he's technically trapped in this kind of portal dimension out there at the end of Batman 151. So how do you splice the two? It's a little difficult, right? It's one of the things, but you just kind of roll with it. But what is important is that Hal Jordan is now back among friends. And so all it's really going to take now is for him to find someone some way to recharge his lantern. And for those of you guys who were asking at the end of the last video about Sorrow Lantern, there really isn't a lot to go on here, right? Again, you know, he's your Twitter user, your Reddit user, where he's just sitting around complaining about how hard life is. And so he just like takes off out of his apartment and that's it. It's just a one-page spread. Nothing more, nothing less. And seemingly he's going after Carol Ferris. So we don't necessarily know how that's going to play out. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we have a lot to catch up on for DC's Absolute Power. So this picks up with the Batman tie-in, and as we've covered so far, if you need a refresher, you'll find a link to the playlist at the end of this. But the long and short of it is that Amanda Waller has basically launched an attack against the superheroes and has siphoned off like 98% of the superhero population's powers. So most all superheroes are gone. Batman himself was on the mission for a mother box because he was trying to find out why Amanda Waller even wanted one in the first place. And this is amazing. So what goes on here is that with Batman and Catwoman on this mission and essentially on the planet of Zarnia, which used to belong to Lobo before he wiped everybody out, they're going face to face with the Suicide Squad. And Batman gives us this really, really cool monologue over the course of this whole thing, right? He says like, I've been to space before to other planets, but never with Selina. I try not to think of it, how far we are from home, how to separate for even a moment could become permanent. I'm used to knowing my surroundings, but out here, it's all mystery and danger. So I do what I know how to do. I fight like hell. And that's the coolest thing, right? Because when you're dealing with a mother box, you never know where it's going to send you or what's going to happen. And so for the most part, it's just kind of Batman holding his own against like Gunsmith, you know, and Deadeye and different people like that. And it's kind of cool, right? There does come a point when Catwoman is attacked by Black Alice. She'll become marginally important later on down the line, but for the moment, she's not overly significant, right? Basically just like cracking this safe and getting this mother box is paramount for Batman and Catwoman. Now, the other part of this is that if they take the mother box away from Amanda Waller, it's a tool they have at their disposal, right? Meaning they can just jump in and out of virtually any location anytime they want to, because mother boxes are nothing if not just grandiose teleportation boxes. The problem with this is the timer's counting down. And when that happens, a portal activates. Now, here's the cool thing, right? This is where I told you the ending to this is going to be nuts, because what happens is Batman says no explosion, no poison gas. The tomb is unfolding. What kind of countdown was that? And so Batman kind of muses to himself for a moment while he's dealing with like Deadeye, right? Which I don't know about you guys, but whenever I read Deadeye in DC Comics now, I hear Idris Elba's voice from the Suicide Squad film. I mean, I know Idris Elba was Bloodsport, but still, for some reason, it sticks. I don't know why. But there's this kind of reality that Batman really speaks to Deadeye per se, where he says, I've been tracking the family history that's going on with you, and I learned that one, Amanda Waller is your aunt, right? That's why you call her Amanda. It's not why you call her Waller. And he's like, you didn't even notice what you were walking through. Your family stolen by Waller, including your mother. So it's just one of these things where effectively his life was kind of stolen by Amanda Waller, and it's just been nothing but lies, which for the most part is normal. I wouldn't say that Deadeye's important enough that this is going to be like a significant plot thread over time. That may or may not be the case, but it does feed in to Absolute Origins, which basically tells the origin of Amanda Waller really for the first time in a meaningful way in DC Comics. Although I think it's like for the first time ever in DC Comics that we're getting an origin for Amanda. But of course, after this, focus shifts to Bizarro, right? Because Bizarro at that point is kind of being used by Batman as a distraction of sorts, in the sense that like Batman gets in front of him so that when Gunsmith starts shooting, that he accidentally shoots Bizarro in the back. That's really kind of offering some measure of a distraction, because with Bizarro being basically dumb, he thinks the Gunsmith was shooting at him on purpose, right? So it's just kind of a momentary distraction. But the fact is, it does buy Batman a moment of time, which allows Catwoman to continue basically hacking this safe in order to gain this mother box. And eventually she does. But here's the kicker, right? One of the things that happens is you end up getting this kind of carnivorous flying scorpions, right? That just sort of start flying through the area. And for the most part, members of the Suicide Squad start bailing out. Not all of them, but like some of them do. And so when Batman goes back on the offensive to fight Deadeye again, that what ends up happening is the boom tube closes, right? It shuts down. And Batman's like, okay, this is a problem, right? Now, this is, I told you guys, this is when it gets dope, right? Because Selina's like, okay, like, how do we turn it back on? And the response of Batman is, the mother box can respond to thought, but I can't seem to talk to it. And he says, wait, Waller was shielding its energy. Her timer knocked out the tomb and its shielding. Why would she do that? And then Batman gives us this monologue where he says, the air chills. Even the scorpions know fear. If Waller was to lose the mother box, no one was to have it. Everyone would die and it would go home. It would become a beacon. And in the middle of that, Gunsmith is talking and is like, I want to go home. And then it's just flat, right? Gunsmith gets obliterated. And that's where Batman's like, it would become a beacon for Darkseid. And he sees Darkseid off in the distance, right? And like, he just tells Selina, run, just run. Like, we have to get out of here as fast as we can. And Selina's never met Darkseid before, right? Catwoman's never encountered this guy. She has no idea who he is. And Batman's like, he's death, right? We cannot beat him. If we try to fight him, we will die. His Omega beams will incinerate us. There's nothing we can do. They get the mother box just in time. They open the portal and jump through right before the Omega beams reach them and incinerate them. Now, that's the last time you see Darkseid over the course of this. But one of the things I love about how Darkseid's been handled recently in DC Comics is he's no longer just like a dude that Batman can beat with prep time, especially in that Batman Superman story when like they encounter Darkseid and Darkseid just walks all over him with the greatest of ease and the whole time is just talking trash. That's how you do a god in DC Comics, right? He's just this presence that when he arrives, the best you can hope to do is flee for your life and try to survive. It is amazing. So at this point, we switch over to Superman. Now, the other half of this is that, again, because all these superheroes have lost their powers, again, different people are on different missions. Where Batman and Catwoman are trying to find a mother box, Zatanna and Superman are trying to find the map of Mordru. The reason why is because one of the things that's explained, or at least was explained over the course of Absolute Power, is sure, you can like fly from one place to another, different things like that. But in order to kind of operate under the radar and without Amanda Waller knowing what they're doing, attaining the map of Mordru would allow them to use what are called the dark paths, basically shadows, essentially. So it's almost like opening an invisible door that takes you from Metropolis to like Gotham, right? You kind of pass through like this netherworld. And so it's really, really cool because what goes on here is in meeting with Neron, this guy is incredibly powerful, but incredibly duplicitous. And in fact, those of you guys who are unfamiliar with DC Comics, this is one of those very, very rare moments when a superhero from the traditional DC landscape meets with like the whole angelic side, Lucifer and the presence, all that kind of stuff, because Neron is a fallen angel from hell, right? I mean, this guy's pretty incredible in terms of the kind of stuff that he can do and how powerful he is. But again, he's very Mephisto-like in DC Comics. Now, truth to tell, I don't know who came first, Mephisto or Neron. And honestly, I could look it up, but I don't think it really matters all that much. But they're very similar in how they work. And so when the conversation between them happens, what goes on is basically he says, I want something from you, right? That like when they sit down, they're invited by him, right? They sit down at the table, that Neron basically says like, indulge me, right? I know all about Amanda Waller and what she's been up to with her power stealing Amazos. And he says, you need the map of Mordru so you can sneak around in the shadows and get past her defenses. So what can you give me for it, right? For this particular map. And that's where Superman's like, what do you want? Because we're not selling our souls. And the response of Neron is, please, Superman, like your soul is one of the most purest that I've ever seen, but you're never going to die, so it's pointless. And where he's kind of like, I mean, I've died, right? The response of Neron is, and yet here you sit, alive and well. Because truthfully, he didn't die. It turned out he was in a Kryptonian healing matrix because DC decided to dupe everybody in the 1990s by tricking them into thinking Superman died. And then he looks at Zatanna, right? And he says, after everything you've done, the dark magic you've conjured and the company you keep, your soul is practically mine already. And he says, no, I want something much more interesting from you, Superman. I want something precious. I want you to lie. And where Superman's kind of like, what? Right? The response of Neron is, you're the living embodiment of all that is good in the world, a man of truth. I will give you this map that you so desperately need, and in exchange, you'll betray yourself. You will lie for me. And so Superman's just kind of like, okay, you've got a deal. I'll lie for you. And that's where Zatanna's like, no, like you cannot make a deal with a demon like this. And Superman's just like, it's okay, Zatanna, let's go. And so it's interesting because Neron kind of taunts him, right? Like you think you're clever and that sort of thing. And he says, but I also know your secret about the anger you hide. This is not over. And that's where Superman's like, I know. Now here's a cool thing, because I'm actually kind of excited to see where this goes. For those of you guys who have been keeping track of solicitations, there's going to be a fight between Superman and Doomsday, who just escaped hell in DC Comics. Yes, Doomsday went to hell. It was amazing. We covered it. But I feel like this is going to come back to roost. I don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but I feel like it will. Plus, I'm also excited to see an enraged Superman that just cuts loose, right? And just allows himself to be angry like he did against Darkseid in Justice League Unlimited. So ultimately, the two of them end up accessing the shadows and then head into what's called the Dark Roads. And it's kind of cool because making their way through there, one of the things that goes on is that Zatanna kind of reveals, right? She says, Oliver Queen said Waller cut us off from the multiverse, but the multiverse has shadows as well. Waller might have stolen all of our powers, but there is a whole multiverse of heroes that we can call in as a backup, right? And Superman says something like that would turn the tide of this war in an instant. But that's where you kind of get this sort of conversation that goes back and forth, right? Where she says it takes a moment to tame the map to get it to take you where you want to go, that it basically takes you wherever your heart genuinely wants to be. And so it's kind of manipulating your own personal desire, which on the surface seems very, very easy, right? But if you were somebody struggling of like limited means, right? You had very little money, and I were to say, okay, what's your heart's desire? On the surface, you would say like to have $1 billion. Okay, cool. But why do you want that $1 billion? And it would be like, well, because I want to have an easy life. Well, what does that easy life look like? And that's what we're talking about here, right? That like there is the kind of, upside down triangle type of thing, right? All the money in the world. Okay, well, what's at the very bottom of that upside down triangle? The thing that you will get ultimately that you want the most after having all the money in the world, right? Which is a stress-free life, right? Something along those lines. And so it's really cool because again, it kind of feeds into the nature of people. Now, there is also a kind of a bit of a discussion about the nature of why Superman hates magic so much, that he again does have a weakness to magic, but Zatanna also kind of hits on the idea that like he can't control it, and that Superman with all of his power and all of his capabilities is a guy who doesn't know what it's like to live a life without control, because he could kill everybody on Earth if he wanted to. There are virtually no villains on the planet that he cannot kill, and it'd be precious few, right, that he actually couldn't kill. I mean, you probably count them on one hand, right? But the other part of this, as Zatanna talks about, is the nature of what it means to use the map. The map itself feeds on magic, but because she has no magic left, right, her powers were effectively siphoned off, it's feeding on her life force. And it's one of these things where it's a very personal experience for her. And she kind of hits the nature of Superman, right? Because he says, you're wasting away. Are the Dark Roads doing this? And she says, no, it's the map. It pulls from a person's magic, but since I don't have any, it pulls from my life force. And Superman says, you never told me the map could do this. If I had known, I would not have let you come here. And she's like, let me do what? Right? Like, I need my magic back, Clark. No matter the sacrifice, I need it. And the response of Superman is an answer that comes more from a lack of understanding than a genuine place of empathy, because he says, we'll get our powers back. We will, but you need to know you're so much more than magic, Zatanna. And she's like, am I? Right? Like, you're Superman and you're Clark Kent. Hell, you're even Kal-El. I'm Zatanna, right? That's not some kind of a code name that I give myself to inspire hope in people. It's my actual name, right? My magic is everything. She says, this thing that you say you hate is my everything. I barely have friends, and the closest I have to a relationship is a chain-smoking British guy who sold his soul to not one, but 3 demons. You might have a life outside of your costume, Superman, but Waller didn't just take my powers, she took my life. She took my identity. So it's really, really, really cool to see Zatanna presented in this way. I honestly have never loved Zatanna more than I have over the course of this one page in this comic book. In Superman number 18 from 2024, right? It's amazing. But ultimately, their path ends up leading them to the Bleed and the House of Heroes. Now, here's the kicker to this. Normally, you would expect Captain Carrot. I love Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot's a super bunny. Normally, you would expect Captain Carrot to show up here, right? Nope, because they've all been crushed. Absolutely destroyed. And the question has to be asked, what being out here could be powerful enough to crush basically the multiversal Justice League, right? The House of Heroes. Now, when they get there, they actually end up coming across Dr. Light. The Dr. Light, after the whole Dark Crisis thing and basically the restoration of the multiverse, they'd just kind of been out there traveling and visiting the multiverse. And then Amanda Waller sent one of her forces out there, or at least a member of her force, to deal with everything that was going on. If you don't know anything about Dark Crisis, it's not important. All you need to know is that the multiverse was basically restructured. So it's like it blinked out and blinked back, and that was essentially it. And now they were exploring it, quote unquote, for the first time, right? This new multiverse. But more so than that, while Dr. Light doesn't know everything that's going on, one of the things she says is that Amanda Waller's up to something, and it's something big if it involves the multiverse, right? And so when the question's asked, like, who did all of this, right? Like, what's blocking us off from the multiverse? That's where Dr. Light says she sent an agent to live in the bleed, right? The space between universes, basically. It lay in wait for the last year, helping her stop travel between worlds. If it knows that we are here, it will kill us. We need to go now. And that's where Superman asks, like, what could possibly live in the bleed? I mean, just the sheer amount of tidal forces in the bleed, right? Literally the fabric of creation would be enough to tear virtually anybody apart. I mean, it might even kill Superman, truth to tell. And that's where this voice comes out of nowhere and says, she's talking about me, right? And he just says, run. And where no one knows what it is, Superman knows what it is immediately, because it actually goes back to the Batman Superman comic in the first volume when Batman and Superman merged using the ring of Hal Jordan. It was really, really amazing when it happened, right? We'll post a link to it, maybe down in the description. I don't know, because we're already posting a playlist at the end of the video, but it was really, really cool, right? But seemingly this played out the exact same way, but there's huge differences here. Number one, when Batman and Superman did it, they basically used a Green Lantern ring. Number two, this guy's using a Sinestro ring. Now this guy says, you can call me Confusion, but here's the problem with this, right? They make the statement, or at least Dr. Light says, he's from Earth 3. Now, if you've been following DC Comics for the last couple years or so, it's Ultraman who comes from Earth 3, right? Like in evil version of Superman. The evil version of Batman from Earth 3 is Owlman, but those guys are dead, right? I don't remember exactly how Owlman died, but I feel like he's been dead since the lead up, really since like Darkseid War and the lead up to Doomsday Clock, when he was killed by Dr. Manhattan from the Watchmen comics. But Ultraman was killed by Injustice Superman, right? When those two guys crossed over in DC Comics, right? Like, he's been dead for a while. And Superman even says that, right? He's like, you're not Ultraman or Owlman. And like, Confusion doesn't get a chance to tell him who he is, because like, he's just hit by the pieces of the House of Heroes that just comes crashing down on all of them. And so ultimately, the only thing they can do is try to open one of the portals to get them out of the Shadow Realm and bring them back into the real world. But Zatanna's dying, right? The map is continually feeding off of her life energy. And she's like, I don't have the power to do that. And the response of Superman is, then we'll do it together, right? And she's like, but like, magic makes you weak. And he's like, if ever there was a time to face my fears, it's now. Besides, the map has been calling me ever since we started this journey. It wants me, but I cannot do it without you, Zatanna. And so they end up using the map. And when they do, it opens an access hole, literally a shadow, for them to pass through to re-enter into the real world, which coincides with like Mercy, the one-time assistant of Lex Luthor, and Lois Lane, who are literally like crash landing to safety. They end up at what's basically the Fortress of Solitude, and when they get there, Superman's shadow appears on the wall. Lois Lane reaches through, pulls Superman out alongside Zatanna and Dr. Light, and then they're off to the races, because now all these roads, Batman, Superman, they all converge on Absolute Power issue number 3, which is not the conclusion to it, but it's amazing. So switching over to Absolute Power number 3, right, what we end up doing here is picking up on Themyscira. And what ends up going on is that because Batman and Superman haven't returned yet, that you still have like basically Nightwing kind of running the show, organizing everybody and all that kind of stuff. There is a bit of a disagreement between himself and Big Barda, in the sense that Barda's just like, we should just, you know, kill whoever we have to kill and that kind of thing. And her normal, you know, I'm from, you know, Apocalypse or, you know, the realm of the new gods, and killing people is just what we do, right? That kind of thing. But at the end of the day, Nightwing is the one that just kind of like pulls the strings, right? And says, here's what's happening. So he says, Black Canary elected to strike out on her own to figure out why Green Arrow had sided with Amanda Waller. Because Green Arrow siding with Amanda Waller is seemingly how all of this kicked off in the first place, right? That like, he gave her the information she needed in order to launch an attack against the Justice League that was a surprise attack and just start taking them all out. Now, of course, he also says that Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Robin, and Zatanna are carrying out their assigned missions, which of course, you know, again, we just covered here. And he says, Waller thinks the rest of us are beaten and broken, which is what we want. The last thing she's expecting is a counterattack. So we hit back hard. And the question's kind of asked here, like, with what? Like, what do we hit back with, right? I mean, Plastic Man's got a broken arm and the dude's virtually indestructible, right? Like, we have a ragtag group of superheroes here. Most of us are like reserve members of the Justice League or reserve members of the Justice Society of America, right? Like the geriatrics of the superhero world. Like, what are we gonna do here, right? Don't misunderstand. The JSA is dope. Don't get me wrong. But like, they're a bunch of old folks, right? So it's just like, what do we do? That's when Hal Jordan shows up and he's like, the good stuff, right? Like a bunch of weapons from Justice League storage. Captain Cold's gun, Weather Wizard's wand, a lightning axe. It's not gonna be enough to like destroy these Amazos who have been stealing our power, copying our powers, and so on and so forth. But you won't be defenseless. At the very least, in these conflicts, you can even buy time. Now, hell's bells, here's the thing. Here is how pointless Aquaman is. Here's how little anybody takes Aquaman seriously, right? Aquaman is being put on a team with Blue Beetle and Red Tornado. Nobody takes Aquaman seriously, right? But more so than that, like one of the other things that goes on is they realize that like there's a guy named John Starr on Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad. And literally Nightwing says Aquaman's sea friends, right, have pinpointed their headquarters. So basically Aquaman was talking to Fish and the Fish said, hey, go over here, right? This is where you want to be at. I don't know. Nemo helped Aquaman. And so what they do is they all just kind of split off. Now, one of the things you'll notice here as well is that the Flash is basically running around on a motorcycle that looks like it came from the Akira anime, and it's amazing. Wally West is powerless, so that's why he has this motorcycle in the first place. But I'm not gonna lie to you guys, right? I would not be against DC Comics just having Wally West use this motorcycle for the foreseeable future. I know that he's supposed to be running super fast, but I mean, this thing is pretty dope. If I'm honest with you guys, he looks amazing. I absolutely love it. But here's one of the other cool caveats that goes on. What we end up doing here is we switch over to Amanda Waller, who starts talking to Failsafe. Right now, again, Failsafe was the robot that Batman built in case he ever went rogue, and then it was believed that Batman did, so Failsafe activated, and there's a whole storyline there. But in essence, between Failsafe and the Brainiac Queen, essentially the wife that Brainiac tried to make for himself, they're basically the kind of masterminds behind these Amazo robots that are stealing people's powers or, siphoning powers off and different things like that. And what she says is, she says, you assured me your task force would be unstoppable. Explain to me how some of them appear to be running at less than peak capacity. And that's where Failsafe analyzes all of them remotely and says, running remote diagnostics, they seem to have absorbed some sort of infection. And where Amanda Waller's like, are we talking about like a virus or something like that? His response is, no, right? Not a virus per se, Amanda. It's an infection of identity. It's something that we had not considered. They're so powerful, they didn't just take the powers of the superheroes that they've defeated. They actually started taking basically slivers of their moral compass. And Amanda Waller gives what's probably the best response to this, right? She's like, you're telling me that goodness is a superpower? Which was my exact response when I read that. I was like, wait, you're telling me morality is a superpower? Apparently it is, ladies and gents. And it'll manifest basically with Jade Stone, who we'll talk about here in a second. But one of the things that happens here, and it's really kind of a indication of the fact that Failsafe is becoming full of hubris, because what he does is he issues a kind of reset, right, to all the Amazos that are out there, at least those whose programming isn't so far gone. And he says, it won't take more than an instant, not enough time to cause any problems I shouldn't imagine. But the Flash is one of them that they're chasing after, Barry Allen. Barry Allen does have his powers, unlike Wally, who is powerless. And so that momentary instant is just enough for Barry Allen to get away, right? To basically escape from this Amazo. And then in the middle of it, he's hit by basically this guy that comes out of nowhere, right? Not attacked, but hit with a message where this guy asks him, he's like, Flash. And that's where Flash is like, who is this? Is it Hal? Like, did somebody do something? My guy's still in pursuit, but I've picked up some real distance. And this guy says, it isn't Hal, right? And so the person's like, are you speaking through a modulator? I can't tell who you are. And this guy says, it doesn't matter. Just someone that you can trust. Waller's running a supermax prison off the coast of Gamorra. You need to get to the lower levels now. And where Flash asks, like, okay, like mystery man, what do I do when I get there? This guy responds, what Flash always does in a crisis, save the world or die trying. And then he cuts the communication. At that point, you switch over to like Aquaman and his guys, right, who were on their mission, and they end up coming across the Suicide Squad that's been brought back after their mission with Batman. And initially Aquaman just gets the absolute tar punched out of him. Like, it literally looks Like Bizarro punched a hole in his chest. But here's the cool thing, right? He says, like, hold him back with the weather wand. I brought something that I think can stop him. And so, like, Bizarro kills one of the members of Aquaman's team and then punches a hole through Aquaman and kills him, only for us to find out none of it's actually happening. It's an illusion. How? Because Aquaman brought a black mercy plant. When was the last time any of us saw those? Now, for those of you guys who don't know what black mercy plants are, these are plants that attach to you, and then they either force you to experience your greatest dreams or your worst nightmares, depending on what kind of mind you have. Because everything's backwards with Bizarro, he's experiencing nightmares instead of dreams. But this basically leads to like Aquaman and his guys tracking down John Stark. Now, they don't know exactly why they need him. Of course, he's called the Time Commander, so potentially some kind of time travel manipulation will be involved, although I hope it's not going to be that hand-wavy of an ending. But they're like, okay, we got to grab this guy. They do momentarily come across Black Alice, but one of the cool things about Red Tornado is because of the helmet that he has, which he's still kind of learning about the nature of its powers, that it's almost like a star brand, right? Where it just kind of has its own power set that activates based on the need of the user as opposed to the user controlling the helmet. And it basically grants them intangibility, which gives them a kind of moment to escape, but not fast enough because Deadeye fires off a shot. He hits Red Tornado. They end up grabbing him and just fleeing as fast as they possibly can. So it is a cool thing here, right? Because everybody's just kind of struggling, right, in their own way. And so what you do is you pick back up on Themyscira with Artemis and Mr. Terrific. And the cool thing here is that as they're talking, number one, I haven't seen Artemis since like Red Hood and the Outlaws. She was like, if I remember correctly, she was an outcast Amazonian, I believe. I'm a little fuzzy on her history, so don't take that as an absolute, but she is cool. Like, she's such an amazing character, and I really wish they would do more with her. But she says, like, your request has been honored. Everything is in place. And that's where Michael Holt just says, thank you, Artemis. Magic is way out of my wheelhouse, though I am getting a hand on Ten's technomancy. Now, what ends up going on is in the middle of all of this, suddenly the Brainiac Queen emerges. Because she is, in effect, a sentient computer, she can enter out of any and all locations physically, right? Like her essence transports to a location. Then she co-ops all the machinery and creates a physical form for herself, right? And she shows up and says, Mother, before speaking to Amanda Waller, we have located the fugitives and uncovered their base. Their subjugation is imminent. And that's where Mr. Terrific is like, we, and he's like, oh God. And Jonathan Kent shows back up here because one of the things that we've seen over the course of Absolute Power is that Superman's son Jonathan was taken over by the Brainiac Queen and turned into like the ultimate Amazo, right? So this guy just single-handedly takes pretty much all of these guys out. Now here's one of the cool things that goes on, right? The fight earlier between Big Barda and Nightwing was not just about, you know, should they kill, all that kind of stuff. It was about the idea that Nightwing had a plan, but he wouldn't spill the beans on what that plan was. And so what Big Barda says is the others will not make it back in time. This fight is ours alone. I have readied our defenses. She loads up a kryptonite bullet, which will kill John, right? Like if it hits him, it will kill him. And that's where like Raven's like, no. Nightwing said not to do that. And the response of Barda is Batman's child is not here. This is a battlefield from which there is now no exit. Compassion is a luxury we do not have. Today, we kill or we die. It is that simple. And she goes to fire off the shot, but she's literally hit by one of the sticks from Nightwing. And he's like, no, right? You are not shooting Jonathan. Number one, because I'm in charge and I decide who lives and who dies. And number two, because I know something that you don't. A secret that Terrific and I could not risk getting overheard with super hearing from Jonathan himself. We didn't know where he was or if he could hear us. And so he literally calls to him and he says, Jonathan, down here. He's like, you want to fight me? Let's go toe to toe. Meet me on my level. And Jonathan ends up landing right down where Nightwing is, and the trap is sprung, right? Literally, Nightwing says, Terrific's idea, Artemis's execution. The moment John set foot on the ground uninvited, he sprung the trap. The island is suffused with magic. And right now, every bit of it is being focused on Jonathan, purging his system of Brainiac Queen circuitry. And that's where Nightwing tries to talk him out, right? And it's just like, John, like, you have to listen to me. You have to break this control. And the coolest thing is like, John's doing it, right? Like, he's breaking the control of the Brainiac Queen, but is taking everything he has. And so like where Nightwing screams like, you have to stop, John just says, Dad, right? And then like immediately breaks free of the influence of the Brainiac Queen when he thinks about everything that he's done so far, right? All the terrible things that he's done. But while the Brainiac Queen had the ability to influence him, he had the ability to influence her. And he says, I've been inside your head too. Waller lied to you. Everything she taught you about us was poisoned by her hate. What you really need to know about us, about who we are, is the truth. And he literally shows the Brainiac Queen everything that makes the superheroes, that in times of need, in moments of high duress, they are always there. Yes, there's the guilt of knowing they can't save everybody, but there's the pride in knowing they did the best they could. And so what ends up happening is in the middle of all of this, Batman shows up with his mother box at the same time that Superman arrives. And so what ends up going on is Amanda Waller takes over the body of the Brainiac Queen with her programming, and then like literally uses like an emergency override, right? And it's like, you are now controlled by me. And then she tries to destroy John, but Batman shows up with the mother box and then teleports the Brainiac Queen to Pluto. Now it's not going to be enough to keep her gone permanently, but it is enough to get her out of the way momentarily. Superman at that moment shows up on the scene, and there's this really touching moment between himself, right? Where he's like, you saved us all, right? Like your ability to resist the Brainiac Queen is what kept all of us from dying, because you would have killed us all. One, because most of us wouldn't have been able to stop you. And two, I don't know if I could have brought myself to kill you. So it's a really, really touching moment there. But then you pick up with Batman confronting John Starr, and he says, you're coming with us, Starr. And where Starr's like, why? The response of Batman is, because you know, Starr, don't you? You know how to get everyone's powers back. And so what you do here is you pick up with the last page of Absolute Power 3, when you pick up with Barry after he had gotten to that base, right? Waller's Supermax sub-basement. And he says, okay, Mystery Voice, if you can hear me, I'm where you told me to go. And oh my God, that's a transmatter machine. And the map, my map of the multiverse, the one that I've been charting, how? And the response of this person, how else? She's stolen. Like she's taken everything else and she's using it. And that's where Barry finishes the sentence and is like, oh my God, she's using it to build a multiversal army. And as he says that, alternate reality versions of the Flash are speeding up on this guy. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. I'm leaving you guys on a massive cliffhanger. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Make sure you click this playlist to get caught up, and I will catch you all later. Peace. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the conclusion of Absolute Power. It is important to specify this takes place before the DC all-in-one shot that we covered, and actually segues directly into it. But what this does is this picks up with Green Lantern. Now, this is still just before the finale to Absolute Power. Specifically, it's Green Lantern 15. And what this does is it picks up on a lot of the information and things that the superhero rebels, if we want to call them that, are trying to attain. Because remember, at this point in the story, Amanda Waller has imprisoned pretty much all the superheroes that exist on Earth. The power of those superheroes has been taken away and given to the Amazo robots, who are the ones rounding up all the superheroes in the Task Force VII comic, the tie-in to all of this. And so really, it's kind of like a last-ditch effort here. Now, as part of this plan put together by Nightwing, what happens is that Wally West, who's one of the depowered superheroes riding the most amazing motorcycle I've ever seen, along with Hal Jordan, whose Green Lantern ring is depowered, they end up on one of Batman's islands. And what happens is that Hal Jordan basically introduces us to something called the Batwolf, which looks amazing. Like, this Batwolf looks so dope. I really hope we end up seeing more of it in like DC Comics. But what he says is the reason why we haven't seen it up to this point is because it was a prototype, that in reality, whenever it achieves any measure of speed that matters, truthfully, like, it blows up. So ultimately, Batman just kind of decommissioned it and essentially abandoned the island. But because of the situation that they're in, they're grabbing it because it's one of the few bits of Batman technology that exists out there that either Amanda Waller doesn't know about or Amanda Waller doesn't think is important enough to capture. And so this leads to Green Lantern, or really Hal Jordan, grabbing this thing while Wally West follows after him. Now from there, it transitions over to Coast City, and you initially pick up with Dove. Now Dove is not an overly important hero within this story, and really even within DC Comics as a whole, if I'm being honest. I know for like the 3 or 4 fans of Dove who are out there, you guys would disagree, but there's a reason why there's only 3 or 4 of you. But what you get here is her, and really kind of us as the audience, realizing she's one of the few people who doesn't really seem to understand everything that's going on, which really kind of tells us how clueless this girl is, right? Like, superheroes around the world have been captured by Amanda Waller, and she's like, I don't know where anybody else is. This is weird. Where are the superheroes at? Well, I don't know, Dove. Try turning on a TV. But what ends up happening is, like, Carol Ferris shows up here. Now, I may have said Carol Danvers earlier, but Carol Ferris shows up here. And Carol Ferris, for those of you guys who are experienced in the Lantern mythos, know she's the Star Sapphire. And while we don't necessarily have to go super in-depth into this, the Star Sapphire is one of a number of Lantern corps that exist out there, right? It's not just the Green Lanterns. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar with DC, you also have the Indigo Tribe, the Blue Lanterns, Sinestro Corps, the Red Lanterns of Rage, which are amazing, right? Like, they're so dope. But the Star Sapphires are the Lanterns of Love. And so with Carol showing up here and having her Star Sapphire ring, she kind of helps where she can, but then of course she ends up grabbing Dove and they start leaving, and then Dove basically just kind of starts crying, right? That what ends up happening is Carol Ferris tells her, I figure I can take you back to my friends. They're hiding out in the Tower of Fate, right? Where all the other superheroes are. It's outside the reach of Amanda Waller at this point. And in turn, like, Dove kind of starts crying, right? Sort of starts going nuts. So she's like, no, I'm not okay. None of us are. Hawk and the Lords of Order and Chaos are quiet. It's useless. It's all so useless. She kind of just starts giving in to this really sad, dark part of herself and starts crying. And then she starts speaking in a voice that's kind of not her own, where she says, I should have ended it when I had the chance. Now you have to do it. You have to kill me, right? And where she's just kind of babbling on, Carol's just like, what in the world are you talking about? And that's when a voice comes out of nowhere and it says, she has discovered the truth, that nothing matters, everything is meaningless, and the world is draped in sorrow, because this is the Sorrow Lantern, right? Nate, now if we're being honest with ourselves, the Sorrow Lantern is like one of those black pill guys or the incel guys. You'll see what I'm talking about as we get further through this, because it's hilarious. Like, it's not supposed to be, but it's hilarious because this guy is a dipshit. So what ends up happening is Hal Jordan literally grabs like the Batwolf, right? Switching back to Washington, DC. This guy takes this thing and is trying to figure out how to like pilot it or dock it or whatever it is that he needs to do. But ultimately he can't like fire any meaningful weapons or anything. And so he's just like, activate the Batmobile release. And so they activate this thing. The Batmobile comes flying out and crashes into the front of the Hall of Justice. It's dope. Like, I absolutely love this. And then because of the fact that the whole inside of the building is basically being controlled by robots, right? Created by a combination of Failsafe and the wife, or I guess the queen of Brainiac, essentially Amanda Waller's henchman, that like Green Lantern basically activates an EMP cannon that just starts firing in every direction and taking all these robots out. Now, while that goes on, you end up finding out that the mission of Wally West was to get in here, take one of Mr. Terrific's T-spheres, attach it to the computer system so they could download all the data that's in the computer systems. Now, this is important for a couple different reasons. One, it's important because of the fact that it would give the Justice League access to information they had previously lost. Because remember, the attack of Amanda Waller came out of nowhere, right? It was the equivalent of a meteor strike in the middle of the night. You grab what you can, you get out of the house, and you flee. And so with the superheroes not really being able to gather all the information they needed, this is incredibly important. The other thing it does is that it kind of gives the situation where a way out is a way in, which is to say, if Amanda Waller has accessed their information, they can use Amanda Waller's access to access her information. So it can kind of give them a bit of a technological backdoor. Now, whether or not they're able to pull that off, we'll see over the course of the comic, but knowing Mr. Terrific being one of the smartest men in the world, he could definitely do it. The problem is that in the middle of all this, they're met by the arrival of Major Force. Now, here's the thing. Those of you guys who don't know about Major Force, I love this guy. And for all the wrong reasons. Major Force... This guy is amazing. Sidetrack from the story for a second. For those of you guys who don't know about Major Force, Major Force became as notable as he did in DC Comics because when Kyle Rayner was the Green Lantern back in the 1990s, his girlfriend went missing. He eventually gets back to his apartment and finds out she'd been killed and stuffed inside his refrigerator. And Major Force was the one who did it. Like, it was crazy, right? This dude was nuts. And so Major Force is a legitimate psychopath. And much like Captain Atom, because the two of them are basically two sides of the same coin, that Major Force can manipulate infinite amounts of energy. What does that mean? It means Hal Jordan and Wally West better get the hell out of here or they're gonna die, right? There's just like, that's it. There's no way around this. And so following that, you switch over to the island nation of Gamorra. Now remember, Gamorra is the supermax prison where all the prisoners of Amanda Waller are being held. Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, is here. Now for the most part, Alan Scott is a character who hasn't really had a significant role in this story. In fact, he was captured fairly early on in the comic. But the significance of Alan Scott is that he was a member of the Justice Society of America. He still is. They were essentially the Justice League before the Justice League ever existed, right? In fact, they inspired the members of the Justice League to become superheroes in the first place. So he basically has like old man wisdom, is really what I'm saying here, right? And one of the Amazo robots named Jadestone had essentially become his guard, right, in the prisoner he was in. But Alan Scott, right, ever the old wise man, right, this guy was basically like Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, had just kind of like been having these discussions with Jadestone and was just sort of like, it's time to look inside you and begin asking the real questions, right? Like, who's the bad guy here? Us as the superheroes that try to help people, or Amanda Waller who's trying to lock us away? And I don't even ask that or make that as a kind of a joke. That's really what he was asking the Amazo to comprehend, because the Amazo itself is basically just a robot, right? It has programming. But one of the things that have been established over the course of this is that the Amazo robots, in absorbing the powers of superheroes, had quite literally begun to absorb their morality, which began to conflict with the programming that they had. And so this is one of those instances where DC is introducing a new character that will likely go on to become a regular member of the DC landscape. And he'll go by the name Jadestone, right? It's one of these things you can kind of see coming from a mile away. But switching back over to Nathan, right? Sorrow Lantern. I told you guys he was one of these incel, MGTOW, black pill type guys. One of the things to remember is that Carol Ferris had like left him in order to go back to Hal Jordan. And while the guy does have a legitimate beef, this is why I say, man, this dude is a punk. Because what happens is she's just like, Nate, you can't keep doing this. Like, you have to stop. And he says, Nate, no, he is gone. He was weak. Only sorrow remains, right? The whole of Reddit and Twitter will understand my pain, right? So like he attacks her, right? And then he's like, now feel what you have done. Feel the pain of loss, of sadness. And where she kind of comments to herself that like the feeling of sadness is overwhelming, he's like, yes, it was this sadness that changed me. When you went back to him, went back to the man that leaves after everything he's done, after all the heartbreak, all the tears, and you still went back to him. Why? Right? Carol Ferris in turn channels the power of the Star Sapphire, right? The power of love, and just says, because I love him, right? And that's where Nate's like, I can't stop. I need to let the world know why the only reality is the sadness it holds. That's what I must do, what I must share. I must go on the internet and talk about how girls are bad. And he's just like, I'll never love again. And after I'm done, you won't either. I told you. This dude is pathetic. So ultimately, he just like takes off, right? I mean, just to kind of give you guys like broad strokes, right? Let's scale out and look at the bigger picture here. He was in love with a girl. The girl bailed on him and went back to her ex-boyfriend. And now all girls are bad. Like, that's literally what he's saying, right? Like, okay, I mean, I guess, even though you've never met them all, sure, right? I guess, you know, go for it, home slice. We'll see how far that gets you in life. But then you switch back over to Hal Jordan and the Flash, right? Like Wally West. And while they're essentially making their escape, Major Force catches up to them. And it's important to understand, man, if he gets his hands on them, they are going to die. And that's almost exactly what happens, right? Like, Hal Jordan is fleeing for his life, and Major Force is like, the Queen demands your death. And in turn, when he goes to land this punch, Jadestone jumps in, because Jadestone had been alerted to the actions of Hal Jordan and was sent on the mission to basically capture Hal Jordan and to bring him back in, because Hal Jordan had previously been captured, right? He escapes. Hal Jordan uses the moment to basically activate his escape, right? Essentially jettisons out of the jet and then goes crashing down to the ground. He almost dies, and then Jadestone catches him, and a Green Lantern central power battery seemingly appears on Earth. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how this got here, because I went to the Green Lantern comics. Unless I missed something, there's no indication that it's ever been here the entire time. You'd think it would, right? If Hal Jordan was like, oh man, there's a central power battery over there. Well, I'll just wait a while before I go over there. No, you'd think he'd go over there immediately. So I'm not 100% sure where this came from. If I missed something, someone in the comments section let me know. I mean, you will regardless, right? You guys love correcting me, but like, let me know if I missed something, right? But of course, Hal Jordan uses the central power battery to essentially reach recharge his ring. Now, because Jade Stone is essentially powered by Alan Scott's former Green Lantern powers, and he is, in and of itself, powered by willpower, basically Jade Stone will likely end up becoming a part of the Green Lantern mythos. But of course, this coincides with the arrival of Carol Ferris, who's basically here to help Hal Jordan. The two of them end up leaving while Jade Stone just kind of hangs out at the central power battery, and that takes us into Absolute Power number 4. Now, with this being the conclusion to Absolute Power, this comic is every bit as awesome as you think it is, because the first thing that happens is that all the heroes come together basically in the Supermax prison, but effectively in the Tower of Fate. And what they end up doing is having this sort of conversation on what it is that they do next. But of course, they also sort of establish where we are in the here and now, in the sense that all the superheroes have been freed, and that all the villains that they can get their hands on are basically being put back into security again, right? Wonder Woman says at least half of those rescued are too wounded to follow us, and we have 2 targets to hit. From Waller's Gamorrean base, Batman thinks he can neutralize the Amazos, yet we still don't even know its exact location. And that's where Hal Jordan and Wally West show up and say, actually not true, right? That was the information we were sent to gather, was the location of Amanda Waller's prison in Gamorra. Of course, Hal Jordan also celebrates the fact that he got his ring back, so that's awesome. But the other part of this is that something was being built in the basement of Amanda Waller's Supermax prison on Gamorra. Now, one of the things to remember is the Flash Barry Allen is there, but Barry's dealing with what's going on over there, so he doesn't have time to leave and to come back, tell them what's going on, and then go back to the basement. So they don't know what Barry knows. Now, of course, all this is going to come to a head, so yeah, like they'll find out quick, fast, and in a hurry, and so will we, because the multiversal army is dope. Like, it's so cool. And so that's where Nightwing, who again is still the one kind of leading the charge here, says, all right, guys, listen up. Amanda Waller's not the only one who trades in shock and awe. Tonight, we take back what is ours, not for us, but for a world that depends on us. I will not lie, the odds are not in our favor, and we may not survive, but there is no other path. And that's where he says, Batman, it's time to bring the thunder. And so they basically launch their full-on attack using the mother box to open a boom tube to Amanda Waller's Gamorrean prison. And all these superheroes immediately go against her. Now, under any normal circumstance, this would not be a fight at all, right? Like the entire superhero community, or at least those who were able-bodied and capable of fighting, going against basically some high-tech military guys? No, like it's no contest at all. But because of the fact that all these superheroes are for the most part either severely weakened or completely powerless, it really evens the playing field. And it's dope because what happens is Amanda Waller's forces go to fire off their guns and their guns backfire because they've been sabotaged. And that's when Amanda Waller realizes Green Arrow, who's been by her side the whole time, and the guy who orchestrated the initial attack on the superheroes was the one who turned against her. Now, we all saw that coming from a million miles away, but the question was, how was it going to happen? And we actually get an answer to that here in a little while, and it's pretty ingenious in terms of how this goes on. But then you switch to the Supermax sub-basement, right? Amanda Waller's multiversal gate. Now, this was kind of her backup plan, because the idea was she would use her forces in order to take out pretty much all the superheroes. But if that failed, she would unleash an army from across the multiverse onto Earth. Now, truth to tell, this is probably Amanda Waller overplaying her hand in the same way that she overplayed her hand in having like a mother box hiding out on another planet, failing to realize that like Darkseid will hone in on it and Darkseid will find it, which he did. And Batman and Catwoman escaped just in time to keep Darkseid from invading the DC universe. So I'll tell you guys right now, if that hadn't happened, if like in the Batman tie-in, Batman and Catwoman had failed and Darkseid had killed them and made it into the main DC universe, like on Earth, it would have been game over. Everybody would have died. It would have been nuts. But the cool thing here is we get a couple of cool versions of the Flash and one of the greatest versions of the Flash. The first one we get is Baroness, right, from Earth 10. Then you also get Thunderjolt from Earth 13. But then you get Johnny Quick from Earth 3. Now, Earth 13 is pretty straightforward. Some of you guys may remember it. Some of you guys may not. Earth 13 was basically the reality where demons and monsters essentially ran everything, right? It was really more of a universe of magic than anything else. So you basically had Etrigan, who was kind of like that universe's version of Superman, so on and so forth. So that's why Thunderjolt looks like a kind of twisted version of Bane that has the Flash's powers. The other universe, Earth 10, the reason why this version of the Flash is called Blitzkrieg is because this is a universe where the Germans won World War II. And then of course, Johnny Quick in Earth 3. Earth 3 is the crime syndicate, right? Everybody who knows about DC Comics knows about this, but for those of you guys who don't, Earth 3 is kind of the opposite of the main DC universe. So all the heroes are bad guys and all the bad guys are good guys. It's just the natural state of that. It's a really, really cool set of events. But focusing on track here, one of the things that happens is that they all kind of start splitting up into groups in a variety of different ways that by and large, a lot of the superheroes out there that are just kind of dealing with the foot soldiers of Amanda Waller, right? The rank and file soldiers, they're really more of a distraction than anything else that allows guys like Hal Jordan to basically infiltrate into the room where Barry Allen is, that allow Nightwing and Superboy John Kent to like break through and go directly to Amanda Waller. And so that's why when you switch over to Barry, who's trying to find a way to close this multiversal portal, all these guys are forcing themselves through. Now, one of these guys looks like Owlman, right, from Earth 3, who's that reality's version of Batman. Owlman is amazing. Like, Owlman and Ultraman are incredible. I love those guys from DC Comics, and a lot of fans do, right? I wish DC would do more with Earth 3. I don't even know if they ever did like an Earth 3 line of comics, right? That would be amazing. But what this does is it leads to Hal Jordan showing up and trying to help Barry Allen. Now, the problem with this is while he is able to use his Green Lantern ring to create a kind of wall construct to keep the multiversal wall closed, he cannot do it forever. And while this does seem small, it's actually massive. Having enough willpower to close off a section of the multiverse, that's no small thing, right? There's a massive amount of energy that's trying to pour in. The other part of this is that you have Nightwing and Jonathan who do finally get to Amanda Waller, but Amanda's pissed, right? And here's the cool thing. I have never loved Amanda Waller's character more than I've loved her in this story, because they show up on the scene as kind of like the way superheroes normally do, like, haha, you know, we're here, Amanda Waller, your day is done, you know, like that sort of thing. And she's just like, do you honestly think that we were not anticipating the Kryptonian now that Brainiac Queen no longer has control of him? She's like, what is this, amateur hour? And she like breaks out a piece of green kryptonite. And she's like, I've been playing relatively nice with you metahumans, no more, right? Today, we turn the page on superheroes once and for all and put you out of our misery. And it's just like Amanda Waller at her most ruthless. Now don't worry, man, she gets what's coming to her and it's fantastic. But the other thing you do is you switch over to Batman alongside the Blue Beetle Ted Kord and John Starr. Now John Starr is really the star of the show here, no pun intended, and he's the guy that Batman was really after. The reason why is just an incredibly unique way of using his time travel capabilities, because John Starr as the Time Commander has an hourglass, and by way of the hourglass, he's able to manipulate time, travel back and forth through time, different things like that. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it was my initial thought that when Joshua Williamson and these guys invoked like the hourglass of Time Commander, they were just gonna be like, okay, so like they're just gonna go back in time and undo all this, which would have been a really disappointing end to the story. That's not what happens, and it's incredibly genius. What had happened in the most hand-wavy Batman plot device ever is that Batman figured out that the hourglass of the Time Commander had basically been put, or at least a portion of it put, in every single Amazo that was out there. And we're told that, right? His hourglasses revert objects in time. He put one into each Amazo. That's how they can self-repair. They automatically rewind to the moment before they were attacked. That's genius. It's a genius way to see. This is how you use time in a comic book storyline, right? You don't just hand wave your way to like fix the story and end it because you can't think of anything else. This is such a creative way to do it, and I love it, right? Because when Ted Kord asked the question, like, how in the world does any of this information help us? The response of the Time Commander, right, of John Starr is like, the hourglasses are power linked. There's an override. Hit even one Amazo with this device that I've created, and a chain reaction should rewind all of them to before they stole all of the superpowers, and all that energy gets returned to the superheroes. And that's exactly what happens, but not immediately. Batman shows up with this device and goes to try to like attack one of the Amazos with it, but even he's overwhelmed by the power of the Amazos, because facing off against these guys is like a depowered Justice League facing off against an overpowered Justice League. These guys don't really have much of a chance to go on here. While that's going on, you've got Hal Jordan who's trying to keep this wall intact. It's not working. The wall's falling apart. The enemies are starting to break through. But then like Wally West, Jay Garrick, Max Mercury, and Impulse, these other members of the Flash family come running in order to add their willpower to the power of Hal Jordan, which is great. And this is really kind of a callback in DC, because for the longest time, the Green Green Lantern comics just weren't selling that well. So DC merged the character, right? You had Green Lantern, Green Arrow, but then for a time, Green Lantern was a backup feature in the Flash comics. And that led to a lot of team-up stories between Hal Jordan and the Flash. It's how DC built their friendship over the years within the DC universe. So as a close friend of the Flash family, where he's helped them so many times, they come to his aid. And it's amazing because this reinforces the power of the source wall. And so at that point, you switch back to Amanda Waller, right? And she's like, why did you have to make this so difficult? Imprisonment was the goal. Your escalation forced me to shift my objective to termination. All I ever wanted was to bring justice to an unjust world. All I ever wanted was to end the chaos. Well, that's about to happen. Now, it's a phenomenal ideology, right? I mean, it's like the Jedi and the Sith in Star Wars, right? They both want to achieve the same thing. They just go about it in different ways, right? They both want to bring balance to the Force, peace to the galaxy. Just one of them does it through nefarious means and the others do it by just sitting around and hoping people choose to be nice. And like that's it, right? But it still amounts to the same goal. And that's what Amanda Waller was striving for here, right? Did she go about it through nefarious means? Sure. But the question has to be asked here, right? When you have escalation from villain to hero, right? Like villains step up their game, so heroes step up their game to meet the villains. Villains step it up more, so heroes step it up more. Where does the destruction end, right? Like where does it stop? And so as a third party and arguably the voice of reason, Amanda Waller stepped in doing the only thing she knew how. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because as the multiversal wall is shattering and as all the Amazos are destroying the members of the Justice League, this voice just says, there you are. Sorry to take it from you, Bats, but heroes got a hero, and it's Green Arrow Oliver Queen. He grabs this device, attaches it to an arrow, fires it into an Amazo. The exact thing happened the Time Commander said would happen. All the powers of the superheroes revert back to the superheroes themselves, and hell's bells, Superman flexes for all of us to enjoy the power of his muscles. Look at that smile. But it's amazing, right? Like, it's so cool because like all the superheroes are finally back. The Amazos are dealt with instantly, but then you switch over to Amanda Waller and she is incensed, right? She's like losing her mind. Even the Failsafe robot that was previously designed by Batman turned against Batman and then joined Amanda Waller. That thing's powering down, right? And that's where Nightwing says, Failsafe's drained too, Amanda. What's wrong? Your dream is over. You're out of contingency plans. And she says, Green Lantern and the Flashes are still losing. That gate is my back door. Move an inch and I'll blow your head off. And that's where like Dreamer comes in, right? Now, Dreamer was a character who was forced to work on Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad. And there was a point when she was forced to turn against the superheroes. Ultimately, it was believed she was killed when like the Fortress of Solitude was invaded and everything went to pieces. But in arguably the most hand-wavy moment in comics, that Amanda Waller's just kind of like, I thought you were dead. Dreamer says, you're right. The blast in the Fortress of Solitude tore me apart, but you can't kill a dream, not if it's remembered. John dreamed of me constantly while he was under Brainiac Queen's control. He couldn't let me go. Without realizing it, he literally pulled me into the dreamscape. That gave me the chance to rebuild myself, healing in his dreams and waiting for my chance at you. Is it the most hand-wavy piece of logic in the history of comics? Yes. Is it equally as amazing? Absolutely. I love this. I love it when sometimes they just throw in hand-wavy comic book logic and it just adds to the story, right? Like I never really have an issue here. But what ends up happening is that while the line is being held by the Flashes and the Lanterns, Barry Allen says, I'm hesitant about doing this. And the question is asked why? And he says, because if I activate this, it will close us off from the multiverse permanently. So for those of you guys who were asking the question in DC All In, why are they cut off from the multiverse? This is the reason why. They had to do it to stop the multiversal army of Amanda Waller from invading. And so that's when you get this really amazing moment, right? Where you kind of have Amanda Waller who's just like, so what? All the superheroes' powers are back. What do you plan on doing with them? The people you protect, you're dead to them. I fooled every last one of them. I used the Queen's AI to show the entire planet what I want them to know, that superheroes are monsters. Thanks to that one play, the world's governments will run you off this earth before they let you do so much as save a cat from a tree. And she's like, I won. And that's where Nightwing is just like, you've been hanging out with the bad guys for far too long, Amanda Waller, because that villain rant is exactly what I was counting on. And he presents her to Airwave. And Airwave is a superhero who's a living Wi-Fi signal, as Nightwing basically explains it, but essentially he's a living electricity, right? Like he just broadcasts anything. That whole rant that she just went on, he broadcasted to every single phone, computer, TV screen on the planet Earth. Everyone on Earth just heard Amanda Waller admit to the world that she lied and she is duplicitous. There's no escape from this, man. But at the end of the day, Flash had to pull it off. Flash had to shut down the barrier. Flash has cut off the main DC universe from the rest of the multiverse. And so 2 days after this, what you do is you pick up with Amanda Waller in a prison cell. And those of you guys who hate Amanda Waller, man, you're gonna love this. She is in Belle Reve, right? Now here's the kicker, right? Amanda Waller, as all of you guys know, she's like the J. Edgar Hoover of DC Comics. She's got information on everybody. And she even says it, right? She was like, this whole thing is pointless, right? Given all that I have to bargain with, I'm not above blackmailing my way out of here. Every hidden base, every alias, every secret weakness, there's nothing that I don't know about every superhero on Earth. And Dreamer, who's the one that's kind of taunting her, is like, really, where's the Batcave? And Amanda Waller can't answer. What's Green Lantern's alter ego? How about Mary Marvel's alter ego? Where do the Birds of Prey meet? Where's Booster Gold from? And that's when you realize that what Dreamer had done is she had gone into the mind of Amanda Waller and didn't so much as wipe her memories out, but just remove her access to those memories. Now, what this means is it gives DC an out, right? To basically shelve Amanda Waller for the here and now, and then bring her back at some point in time when she's figured out a way to re-access those memories and then blackmail her way out of prison and then go back to being the person that she's always been. But here's the real kicker to this. Dreamer taunts her with a thing. Those of you guys who know Amanda Waller know, when she brings you onto the Suicide Squad, she plants a bomb in your brain, right? Dreamer hints at the fact that Waller might have a bomb in her brain. And Dreamer doesn't answer her, right? Like she doesn't tell her, like whether or not she has a bomb in her head. It's one of the coolest things, right? And so following that, you pick up with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, who basically meet up in the original Justice League headquarters. And when I say original, I mean like OG, double OG, like Brave and the Bold, first appearance of the Justice League in DC Comics. Like, super old school headquarters, right? I love the fact that these little references and callbacks are being done. But we learn a couple things here. Number one, we learn that like a lot of the superheroes that were really injured are recovering, and some of those include Animal Man. Like that matters. Superman's like an Animal Man, right? Like Animal Man, dude, who cares, man? Yeah, you know what, Superman? Our hearts, man. Like we're shedding those tears for a guy who can turn into a gopher. Like that'll be the day. But then other guys like Red Tornado and so on and so forth. But the other thing we learn is that when everybody's powers were restored, some people swapped powers. So there are superheroes out there like Plastic Man who can actually make himself intangible. He can't stretch the way that he traditionally used to, which I'm actually really excited to see where DC goes with this. But one of the things that Oliver does in bringing them here is he says, like, look, here's the thing. I get that I pissed you guys off by going underground, pretending to work alongside Amanda Waller, having the whole ruse and all that kind of stuff. But understand, man, like we were caught flat-footed, right? Had we been in constant communication like the old days, that never would have happened. And he's not wrong, right? Like when DC got rid of the Justice League of America after Crisis on Infinite Earths, Grant Morrison brought it back in the JLA run in 1998. And one of the things that they did during that run is Martian Manhunter created a psychic link between all the members of the Justice League so they could all communicate without having to wear little devices, right? Walking around looking like middle-aged men with their Bluetooth headsets, right? You know, that kind of thing. Right? Instead of doing that, like they could just use Martian Manhunter as a communication relay. But what Oliver Queen says here is we weren't doing that, right? Like now there's so many loose ends that we have to wrap up because we honestly just got lazy, but we need to be bigger than we were before. We need to be more coordinated, more proactive. And that's where Batman stops him and it's just like, we want to show you something. And so this directly goes into the DC All-In comic, which is kind of cool because for those of you guys who watched Justice League Unlimited, and yes, I started watching it, it's okay. Like this is how it all kind of kicks off, right? But in any event, we're going to bring this video to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like and I will catch you all later. Peace.